Thank you, everyone. Chair, I can confirm we're live on YouTube.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on 29th of September 2021. I'm your chair, Councillor Eileen Wragg. Based on the decision of our extraordinary meeting of Council on the 26th of July, I would like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this council has delegated much of its decision-taking power to our senior officers. This is for a short period of time only, to the 17th of January 2022, and is due to concerns relating to COVID risks. Consequently, this meeting is being held remotely and only on a consultative basis. We will continue to adhere as closely as possible to the procedural rules detailed in our Constitution. However, where this meeting would have normally decided a matter, it will now make a recommendation to a senior officer. The officer will then take that recommendation into account when making their decision. The meeting can be viewed live online and will be recorded. Please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. Therefore, may I remind colleagues to be careful with their language and that the code of conduct applies throughout our meeting. We reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this meeting is dependent on internet connection and the power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we're not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, this meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for further details. Could colleagues please ensure your microphone is muted when you're not speaking? This will help avoid any disturbance from background noise. Could you also please keep your points short and not interrupt when someone else is speaking? Should you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public can view the agenda by visiting our website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed that you are present, please mute your microphone again. Over to you, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with you, Councillor Wragg.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Davey. I think I have seen Councillor Davey. I'll come back. Councillor Dasaram.
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Gazzard.
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Present.
Councillor Key.
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Present, Wendy.
Councillor Pratt.
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Present, Wendy.
Councillor Whibley.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Have we got Councillor Davey?
I think
Yes,
he's away.
I'm here.
He's there. He's
Oh.
Is that better?
yeah.
Yes. we
I've
can
just
hear you.
turned my microphone up. I think it was a bit low for some reason.
Thank you. I can confirm we're quorum up for this morning's meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Right. Apologies. Do we know? Wait a minute. Yeah. Do we have apologies, Wendy?
Yes, we do have apologies. We've got Councillor Chris Wright, Councillor Pook, And I do believe Councillor Bloxham did give her apologies. So
Yes,
it's
thank
just
you.
the minutes now of the previous meeting.
Yeah. Do we know if Councillor Wright has completed his training?
No, not yet.
Oh, thank you. Right, agenda item 1, the running order for today's meeting and the speakers list can be viewed under agenda item 1 on pages 4 to 5. Agenda item 2, minutes of the consultative meeting held on the 1st of September 2021, pages 6 to 10. If anyone has a comment on these minutes, please raise your electronic hand. If there are no raised hands, I will take it as an indication that you are happy that the minutes are noted. There are no hands. We've had apologies. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest, and there'll be a roll call for any declarations. Wendy.
Thank you. So, members, when I call your name, if you do have any declarations, could you just confirm the item number, what type of interest it is, and why you're declaring that interest? So, Chair, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, none that I'm aware of, but if I do become aware, I'll mention it at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, good morning, Wendy. Thank you very much. Just to say that I'm a ward member for agenda item number 10, and also a resident of Broadclist and on Broadclist Parish Council.
And they're all personal.
Yeah, thank you. And also, yeah, I've received an email with reference to agenda item 10.
Email. Is that for, sorry, is that, would you class that as a lobbying email?
Right.
No.
Yeah, no, just an email from the owner, if you like.
From the applicant, sorry.
Not the applicant on this, no, a neighbour.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Brown.
A ward member for 20/2058.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, in respect of agenda item 12, 21 1530 FUL, I'm a town councillor for Exmouth, so that's a personal interest.
Thank you very much. Councillor De Sarum.
Good morning, Wendy. Likewise, agenda item 12, application 21/1530 full. I am an Exmouth Town Councillor, as is Councillor Davey, so that is also a personal interest. And nothing else for the agenda today. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Item 12, Wendy, personal interest. I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Item 11, Wendy, ward member for both parish councils that have actually put in objections, and a parish councillor for Bishopsclist.
Thank you very much. Councillor Key.
Yes, Wendy, ward member for 20/2058, item 9.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Nothing on this list. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Wendy. Item 8, that's number 211788. I'm a member of East Devon AONB Partnership. I'm a ward member, and two owners of properties involved in that application have contacted me.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
I think I will, if you don't mind, declare an interest, a personal interest on application 1436 and 1437, which is 36 is full and 37 is LBC, on the basis of Ratcliffe Farm. I did rent them buildings from the previous owner. It's many years ago, 25 years ago, but I'm just saying it because I know them and I did rent them, and I just make that declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley.
Item 12, I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor. That's personal interest. Other than that, none. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Woodward.
Yes, item 12, personal interest as an Exmouth Town Councillor. Thank you. Nothing else.
Thank you.
And Wendy, I've just remembered, I knew there was something. Item 8, 21/17/88 variation. I had a phone call from Councillor Pratt and also emails, but I wouldn't say that was lobbying. It was more for information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Chair.
All right. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency to discuss. Item 6, confidential exempt items. There are none. Agenda item 7, appeal statistics, pages, it's gone.
Pages 11 to 19.
Thank you, Wendy. It disappeared. Update from Mr. Rose, Development Manager. And Mr. Rose, I think one of the interesting ones which we've struggled with in the past is one appeal which has been decided, and I wondered if you might, add anything you think might be worth adding to that one. That is the one for the Rowans, Sidmouth Road, Cliff St Mary.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Yeah, so there's 4 appeals have been decided that's on this agenda. I'm pleased to say 3 of them have been dismissed, but as the Chair says, there was one appeal that was allowed that relates to the Rowans on Sidmouth Road, so right next to Creeley. It was refused on the basis that it isn't near a settlement. So policy D8 of our local plan currently says that we can allow conversions of buildings to residential where they're in close walk-in or travel distance to a range of services and facilities. We felt that site wasn't being near Creeley and not near a settlement. But you'll see for the indecision, the inspector disagreed, saying that he felt it was fairly close to Cliff St Mary, close to the jobs at Creeley and to Hill Barton, where there are a number of jobs, and that there's a bus service that runs on the A3052. So in light of that, the inspector determined that the proposal was in a sustainable location. These are very, it's very hard. It's case by case basis on these applications, and we seem to get slightly different decisions from different inspectors, depending on where they feel the importance of the way is in terms of relationships to places like Hill Barton or settlement boundaries. And no doubt it's something that members of Strategic Planning Committee will be looking at in terms of the review of the new local plan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Right. Agenda item 8 now, application number 21/1788, variation major, and it's Barton Grange, Barton Rise, Tipton St John, pages 20 to 32. I'd like to welcome Simon Rice, objector, and Paul Humphreys, the agent. Thank you. Chris, can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, hopefully you can see my screen. So Barton Grange, Barton Rise, Tipton St John. So this is the site here at the edge of Tipton St John in the AONB up the hillside, as you'll see from the photos. So as the Chair said, this is a variation of condition to a 2015 application, which in itself was an exception site. So it's On the basis of the affordable housing need in the area at the time, it consented 5 open market dwellings and 10 affordable dwellings. At the time, this was considered to be the most suitable site for that proposal. So it was granted back then, subject to a number of conditions. And members may recall that this application, a very similar application, was before them in June of this year. This one's back before you because the recommendation to approve is contrary to the view of the town council. I don't know if members will recall that the previous application on the site the one that was determined in June, proposed changes over the original consent in terms of revised landscaping scheme to reflect some differences to how the site had been built out and some drainage changes. There was changes to landscaping and drainage that took quite a considerable amount of time to resolve with the applicant between DCC as the flood risk authority and the landscaping officer. And members may recall that the part of that proposal was also to remove living green walls that were on the side of these top 3 open market units. And at the committee in June, members would resolve that the proposal put forward by the applicant to paint the walls green rather than to have living walls was unacceptable and would have a harmful visual impact on the AONB. So that application was refused. So we've got the application back in now, proposing the same landscape changes, drainage changes, and changes to the fenestration, or very small changes to some window positions that were all that members found acceptable at the June committee, but this time they proposed to reinstate the green living walls to those relevant units. So this is the layout of the scheme. As I say, there's been a lot of work gone in over the months between the landscape architect and DCC as the drainage authority to make sure that the drainage scheme works and the landscaping scheme, which is yet to go in, is suitable for the site and its location in the AONB. So these are the elevations, or some of the elevations of units 1 and 3. So you can see this is where the living green wall was proposed on the side, and it was proposed as part of the application. It was refused just to paint it green. Now, all the other changes that are proposed to the window positions, the drainage and landscaping are as per the proposal put forward in June. And as I say, members refused that solely on the basis that they weren't happy with the green walls, painted green walls, rather than the living green walls. And so these are the photos. These are the top 3 units that you can make out there. And as I say, they're proposed now to reinstate those living green walls to those proposals. And as I say, you can see here the scheme. So it's these top units behind here. You can see the landscaping to the site hasn't been started. The applicant is proposing that when and if they get planning permission, they will reinstate, or they will put in that landscaping scheme. They will finish the site. And as I say, there's been a lot of work with the landscape architect at East Devon to ensure that a suitable landscaping scheme is going to be provided, given the AONB location. In terms of the green walls, well, the applicants addressed the previous reason for refusal that the committee put on by reinstating those living green walls, and they've given us information about how they can retrofit that to the 3 units. So you can see 2 of them in the photos there, and you can see how prominent the site is. It's an unfortunate situation in that these, I believe, the open market units, which one of the speakers will mention, have been sold. So the developer has sold those units to the occupiers, even though they've built the scheme out not in accordance with the planning permission, and the new occupiers are now in these units. And obviously they're going to be affected by having to put these living green walls back into the scheme. But it's there in terms of getting a better visual impact on the AONB, and it's disappointing, surprising that the developer sold the units to the applicants, I assume knowing that it didn't accord with the planning permission and that they had another application in on the site. And also, I suppose a little surprising that maybe this wasn't drawn to the attention of the occupiers of those units when they purchased them. But obviously we've got a duty here to protect the AONB, and members at the June committee determined that the scheme was unacceptable without those living walls. So the applicant has, or the developer has proposed to put those living walls back. And I hope that there's an agreement in place between the owners of those occupiers now and the developer to do that for them. And as I say, they've made it clear that if they get consent, they can also then go on and finish the landscaping scheme that we've negotiated. So on the basis that the applicant has addressed the one reason for refusal that members had on the previous scheme in June by reinstating those living walls, we're recommending approval subject to a linking agreement and subject to obviously the landscaping being provided and those living walls being provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And just for clarification, if any is needed, on page 25, paragraphs 4 and 5 clearly show that the matter of the adhering to the, well, the new owners is a civil matter. Okay, thank you. Right. Objector Simon Rice, is he here?
Indeed, I am here, and good morning.
Good morning. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Rice.
Thank you. My main concern is for the structural integrity of our homes and the well-being of the 3 families should the proposed living wall from Biotecture with its hydroponic system be installed. This system was specifically designed for use on commercial buildings in urban and highly polluted areas. It was not designed for residential homes in the country. The original plan proposed that a living wall should be fitted on 2 of our walls. There was no mention of attaching a hydroponic system to the walls to water the plants. There was no mention of a separate irrigation plant room to feed water to the hydroponic system. The specific location for the irrigation plant room remains a mystery, but as they can be noisy, it would have been helpful to know exactly what is being proposed. There is no record of a structural engineer having ever looked at our garage walls to determine whether they would be suitable for the Biotecture system. Our garage walls are not solid, nor cavity. They are render-coated, timber-framed walls that need maintaining. One designated wall houses a gas boiler, electrical wires and sockets, heating pipes and ventilation outlets. A recent SNAG survey described the area as having an incomplete wall and unfilled gaps to the area around the boiler and pipes. It would be putting families and their homes at risk if the proposed plans were approved without ensuring that it was safe to do so. We already have 2 living walls on our home in the shape of 2 sedum roofs, which are eco-friendly, encourage biodiversity, and they are watered when it rains, as it often does here in Devon. The landscaping plans pose more questions than answers. Our garden and banks have been included in the seeding plans without consulting or considering us. Surely homeowners have a right to choose what we plant in our land as long as we abide by the area of outstanding natural beauty restrictions in our transfer deeds and respect our neighbours' boundaries. A living wall alone would not screen our property from the residents of Mallock's Close or anywhere else in the village. From a distance, the walls would look no diff greener than they do now. If the cream walls were painted green, it might be a step in the right direction. As my house is the nearest Mallock's Close, I would be happy to work with our local landscaper and plant 3 strategically placed trees on that side of the garden.
30 seconds remaining.
This would be the most effective and eco-friendly way of screening our property without further delays. I would also be happy to submit the SNAG survey that I quoted for verification purposes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Now the agent, Paul Humphreys. You've got 3 minutes, as you know.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman and fellow councillors. I'd like to point out that the application has been as a result of extensive dialogue between the District Council, planning officers and landscape architect, Devon County Flood Risk Management Team and our practice, and we thank the officers for this. You will therefore be aware that this has resulted in officers' support, and I quote, "The amended scheme in this application is recognisably of the same character and extent as the scheme that was first granted permission back in 2011. The scheme, layout and overall design of the dwellings remain broadly the same, but in the revised scheme, a number of adjustments have been made to elevations, landscaping. None of the changes, however, would diminish the overall quality of the scheme or lead to an adverse effect or impact on the AONB. The drainage scheme has been considered in detail by Devon County Flood Risk Team, who accept the submitted details that should prevent any flooding of neighbouring properties that was a concern during the construction phase. The new landscaping scheme will in time soften the development and grass will return to the hillside to cover the earth. It will take a period of time for the developments to mature, but this application signals the end of the construction period and the beginning of the integration of the building into the landscape as initially conceived. So subject to conditions to secure the implementation of the landscaping, drainage and other matters, the amendments to the previously approved scheme are acceptable. Most importantly, this latest application now includes for the incorporation of the green living walls, which was of a concern to members previously. And I quote further, the proposal now fully addresses the previous reason for refusal and therefore subject to a condition securing implementation of the living walls and other conditions, as well as a deed of variation to the legal agreement as before, the proposal is supported. The recommendation is subject to 12 conditions outlined within the officer's report, and I've consulted with my client who is happy to accept all of those imposed conditions. Thank you for the time and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Now we go to the ward member, Councillor Jeff Pratt. You have no time limit, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point before I start, Chair. I believe it's been agreed that there are 2 photographs which I supplied, which Chris was going to bring up on the screen.
Yeah. Could I also just ask Paul Humphreys, are you prepared to take questions? Paul Humphreys?
Yes, I am, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chair, I don't have any questions for Mr. Humphreys. Shall I start now with the
yes, please
my
do.
comments? Yes, just for members to see exactly what we're dealing with here. The first photograph you can see there shows the site from Mallock's Close, and that is the AONB land, which is viewed from the Mallock's Road site. And the next photograph shows the position from, again, Mallock's Close of the site. And the concern really is the cream-coloured buildings, which really do stick out. And if you look at the top 3 buildings to the left of the site, you can see where the green painting has been put on the northern elevation. It's been arrowed now by Chris. That's number 19, showing where the arrow is now, the green colouring. And the next one has also got green colouring in the same position. And further along, there's the number 15 has got the same colouring. And that green colouring really is just paint, external paint. And it seems to tie in quite nicely with the colouring of the trees in the background. And there's no objection to that colouring. And quite frankly, to put in a green living wall now at this stage is really not justified, because it's the main part of the site which is really the offensive part of the site because of the cream colouring of those walls. But we'll get on to the matter now, but I just wanted you to see what we are dealing with here. Again, if you could go back to the original site, that's right. And again, when you see that, and then go back to the dwellings as they now are, you can see the problems that people have or have issues with the development in that sense. So dealing with the point on the green living wall, the house walls, I am told, in question are not solid nor cavity, but render coated timber framed. The main concern is for the structural integrity of the buildings, should the proposed living wall be installed. This has not been taken into consideration. The applicant proposes to use a product from Biotexture. This company devises living walls specifically for public and commercial properties in the city and town areas. Examples being Heathrow Airport, Edgware Road railway station, and the stands and buildings at Wimbledon and Lord's Cricket Ground. These commercial buildings are very sturdy and can bear the weight of the hydroponic systems behind, including a wall of plants. No structural engineer has ascertained whether the walls are suitable to support the weight of the proposed systems. Consequently, the proposed living walls have the potential to cause severe damage to the property and endanger the structural integrity. Furthermore, a system consisting of irrigation pipes as well as a living wall was not mentioned with the original plans. Installing a living wall as proposed will not improve the screening of the properties from Mallock's Close or Barton Orchard, as provided by the dark green paint applied as seen to parts of the northern elevations of the properties. Originally, the buildings were to be eco-constructed to Code 5 building regulations. This requirement became non-mandatory in 2015 and was removed in Planning Approval 152753 VAR. The position regarding the green painting on the three properties, the owners of those three properties have made a proposal that at the cost of the developer, that additional green colouring to the north and west rendered elevations of the properties would effectively camouflage these houses. To impose green living walls would be symbolic only and not justified, when the real hillside visual jarring in the large vertical slabs of light-coloured render with the remainder of the development. And you can again see it on the photograph 2. The visual jarring is caused by the cream effect of the buildings, not the green part, which blends in quite nicely with the AONB setting. So in regard to that part of the application, I would object to that part because the living wall application, it would be expensive, complex, not without risk and requiring regular maintenance. I've said Code 5 building regulations do not apply, and the additional colouring of render proposed above by the owners of the properties would cost less, making it unnecessary. The cost savings would be more productively employed in enhancing further screening of the entire site. Turning now to the landscaping part of the application, the development visual impact, particularly to the north and west, is adverse, blighted by large slabs of, as I said, the light cream rendering of the properties and a lack of any screening of the landscape. In order to accelerate the blending into the AONB setting, the entire development urgently requires a landscaping design that sympathetically and comprehensively screens and enhances with species of trees, hedges, and shrubs. That is not what the applicant is proposing. The proposed dwellings were to be set in glades amongst a visual screening framework of light canopied native species woodland. The developers' great plans for landscaping have been considerably reduced, but they are dealing here with an AONB setting. Development proposals in ANOB must have regard to the conservation and enhancement of its natural beauty and give great weight to conserving and enhancing the landscape of the AONB in order to be in conformity with the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 176, which has the highest status of protection in relation to planning applications. Again, the local plan strategy 46 also states that development will need to be undertaken in a manner that is sympathetic to and helps conserve and enhance the quality of the natural landscape in an AONB. Development is only permitted where it conserves and enhances the landscape character of the area and does not undermine landscape quality. The planting and landscaping is a necessity to stabilize the site. The development is an eyesore from various vantage points in and around the village. We do not have here modern buildings which discreetly set in the hillside, surrounded by grassland and sympathetic plantings. Landscaping is, as originally proposed, would have mitigated the visual impact on the village as a whole, and particularly on Mallock's Close. Now we're dealing with owners of these properties, then my view is that the owners and the developer's agent, together with the landscape officer, should attend a meeting to see if they can sort out the issues relating to landscaping, because there is a serious problem here. And as shown by photograph 2, the buildings do stand out, and really this is not good enough for an AONB. So, Chair, I would like to propose refusal of this application.
I just stop you there, Councillor Pratt. When we move in, I'm going to open this up for questions. So members, unless you've got a question for Mr. Humphreys or for Councillor Pratt, could you please take your hands down? And when we go into the meeting after the questions, I will come to you first, Councillor Pratt.
Madam Chair, will I get a chance to speak as ward councillor?
Yeah, who's that?
Councillor Faithful.
You're not on the list to speak, but of course you can. You're a ward member. Would you like to speak now?
Well, yes, please.
Off you go then.
The previous, the reason it was rejected before was partly this painting the walls green, which will only last as long as it stays painted green. To my mind, one shade of green all the way across doesn't really blend into the surroundings. It's actually quite a blot in itself. Part of the issue was also that it was going to be painted green and then ivy grown all over the walls, which would cause probably more structural damage than a living wall where you have a variety of plants. A proper living wall should be more like a camouflage, a breaking of various colors and seasons and things, which one coat of green doesn't do that. I sympathize with the residents who seem to have been dragged into this, but this should have all been sorted out before the properties were completed. I would expect any living wall that was put in place should properly have protection between the living wall and the structure of the building. I think that, the resident is right to be concerned, but I think the developer should have proper protection between the two. But I don't see the justification in scrapping a living wall. Maybe this particular system they've wanted to put in is maybe not the appropriate one, but I don't see that completely scrapping a living wall would be acceptable. I think that's all I have to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. Now, I understand that you were invited to speak by Democratic Services, but they didn't have a response from you. So in the future, if you or any other ward members want to speak, please notify Democratic Services, because it is very frustrating. It alters the running and the length of the meeting as a whole. So thank you. Right, questions. First of all, Mr. Humphreys, would you like to respond to any of the points that have been made, please? All of them, if you can.
I think you're on mute, Paul.
Yes, I will just come back on the point that one of the owners made, and that's regarding the suitability of living walls. We need to remember that vegetation was here millennia before cities, settlements, etc. And vegetation is benign and will grow irrespective of its location. It is true that very often it's used in cities because the real problem that we have as built professionals is that the air quality in settlements is very, very bad. I could go on, but air quality is going to be one of the biggest killers over the next few decades. Living walls really help, but in this case, it was a mechanism agreed by the landscape architect and the councillors that it would indeed help assimilate into the background. I can confirm that the technical details, the specification, the makeup of the wall with backing panels, the studs in terms of shear, it was all designed to work from a technical viewpoint. And those are the 2 points I'd like to come back on, Chairman.
Thank you. I hope that allays the fears of Mr. Ice and also Councillor Pratt.
Chair, could I just ask one question, Mr. Humphreys?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Mr. Humphreys, I've heard what you've just said about the living walls. Is it possible that then, if there's such a good thing, that the developer will insert living walls on all 15 houses?
I can't speak on behalf of the applicant. The applicant isn't here, and to agree to that, I don't think it's reasonable. Actually, I feel somewhat on the spot. I can't come back on that positively. I will certainly ask that question. There are financial implications, of course, but it was felt originally that the units that are higher near the top, the market rate units, because they are close to skyline, more visible, it was deemed appropriate then to introduce the living walls to assimilate to the landscape and to mitigate visual impact.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Humphreys. But if you could look now at the screen and look at photograph 2 below the first photograph. If you look at that photograph there, you can see the 3 properties right at the top of the left-hand corner of that photograph, showing what has been painted green at the moment. But then you look at the rest of the site with its cream walls. It's the rest of the site which is causing the problem as far as adverse visibility. And you just imagine the people who wake up every morning in Mallock's Close looking at that compared with what it used to be like.
Through you, Madam
So
Chairman,
are the developers going to do the whole development in a living green wall? Why should it only be just 3 properties?
Shall I come back through you, Madam Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there's 2 things here. As I've said before, I will ask, but I wouldn't hold much hope. It is also not the content of this application. No. So that would be a variation and or a new application, notwithstanding the response by the applicant and the developer. The thing that I do take exception to is that when we very first conceived this design back in 2011, we had agreed with the then landscape officer, with the officers, which views should we consider that are most in the public concern. And indeed, it is that top photograph. It's a little bit, naughty is the wrong word, but it's how you present it. Your lower picture is from a much lower perspective and not from the same vantage point. I would do the same as you, perhaps use illustrations to serve my point, but I'm not sure that it's a valid point to raise at this stage.
Thank you. And we do have to deal with what's before us, not what happened before. Right. Now, Mr. Rose, would you like to come back?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on that point. Well, you said it yourself, actually. It's not part of the application to put green walls on any other units. It wasn't part of the original application in 2015. It was proposed just for those top units because they are further up the hillside. So we couldn't justify asking for it on the remainder of the units. And the other thing I'd say, which I made in my presentation, is, of course, the landscaping scheme hasn't been put in on this site yet. So when that landscaping scheme does get put in, there will be a softening of the site. We're never going to screen those buildings. It's a site on the hillside in the AONB, and it was originally granted, remember, back in 2015 because of the affordable housing benefits and there being a lack of other sites. So we certainly can't, with this application, go down the route of insisting that any of the other units have living green walls. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Rose. Now, questions, please, from members. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Mr. Humphreys. I mentioned living walls, and they're excellent in themselves. There's a very good one at Exeter Business Park. But I'm just concerned by what Mr. Rice said as an owner about the effect on the timber framed building. And I can understand that the living walls of themselves, if they're standing in isolation, would be an excellent thing. But what has any study been done on the effect on this particular wall that it'll be next to? Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam
Yeah.
Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have undertaken full detailed design in consultation with the timber frame, the project structural engineer, the timber frame structural engineer, and we have worked up details that have been signed off by building control, the original warranty provider for the buildings. We will, of course, revisit that now because we've got the issue of the green paint. Does that need to come off before blah, blah, blah? But I can assure members that obviously what we're looking to try and do is to do something which is a long-term fix, and it will be done properly.
I'm sure that with the landscape officer that we have, he's very, very committed, very conscientious, and I'm sure that that will be the case. Right, Councillor Dasaram, you have the question?
No, Madam Chair, I'll drop my hand. I've got something to say, but I'll wait till you open it up.
Right, then if there are no more questions, I'll go now to the ward member. Is that a question, Councillor Skinner?
Sorry, no, I thought you were opening it up.
No, yeah, I'm going to the ward member, Councillor Pratt, who's done a lot of work on this application. Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Well, Chair, the situation is I wish to make a proposal that this application be refused on the grounds that the green living wall is not justified because it only deals with 3 properties on the site, and it will have no bearing on the visibility issues. My feeling is that the green paint on the walls as shown in that photograph on the screen now is adequate and does in fact do the job of blending in with the trees and the colouring of the AONB site, and this is where I stand on that point. And as far as landscaping is concerned, I think that the owners of the property should have meetings with Chris Harides, the landscape officer, and Mr. Humphreys, the landlord's agent, and with the landlords, the developer's agent, and the developer, and to see if they can resolve the issues over the landscaping to make it as effective as possible. They are owners now of the part of the application site. So again, on the landscaping issue as it stands, I would refuse that application as well.
Thank you.
I would propose refusal.
Is there a seconder for that, please? There is no seconder.
Yes, I'll second it.
Who's that?
That's Tony Woodward.
Oh, right. Right. Tony, would you like to speak on it?
Yes, thank you. Well, I can see the green wall and it's painted green. It seems to be when the rest of the landscaping is done, then the other parts that stick out will be obscured. So it just seems as such a small part of the whole vista there, that the green part, from this distance on the second photograph, we can see what difference would it make at this distance to see whether it's a living wall or a green wall. It would probably look the same to me. So I don't see that the expense of going to a living wall and the ongoing issues that might arise by having an irrigation system for the living wall, I think that might cause problems between the 3 houses. I think it just adds complications for the future, which could are unnecessary in the context that what we can see now, that the rest of the landscaping will be adequately obscure and blend in those buildings. But as Councillor Pratt said, it's actually the bits we can see in the light colour, which are the problem to me, not the green wall at the back. So I don't think it's necessary to put in the living wall, however much I like them, in this particular instance. I just think it's going to cause problems for everybody in the future. So,
thank you. And just to point out to members, as I'm sure you're aware, expense is not a material planning consideration. Thank you. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who took those two photographs, but I mean, I think they're disillusioned because they should have. I agree with what Councillor Mr. Humphreys said, that they should have been taken from exactly the same place, because that is not so, and therefore those houses that are there would not be so conspicuous as what they are now. The thing that I saw on that bottom photograph was the green wall. To me, I would have created merry heck, because that, to me, that green is not in keeping with the grass, with the field, with the trees that are around it. It is too prominent in there. Going back to what's been said about the conservation, we have a very, very good conservationist there, and I mean, he is doing, or they are doing exactly what has been requested by the planning officers, and therefore I think we should agree. I'm sorry I can't agree with what's being proposed, but that's my opinion, and I think that if that green was, I'd like to see that green change, lightened down a bit, because I think it would be in much better keeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I sit here absolutely amazed with what we've just been hearing. We made a decision on the 17th of the 6th saying the green walls have got to stay. And now we're going to overturn a decision with no material change in the planning policy. What's that going to cost us in the courts? We have acted unreasonably if we go against our previous decision. Nothing has changed. I vehemently disagree with those green walls that are currently there. They look disgusting. A proper green wall is what was required in 2013. It's what we said was required earlier this year. And it's what we should be accepting now as the only choice to go forward. The costs and the legal matters are civil matters between the developer and the owners. And I do feel sorry for the owners, but it is a civil matter. They bought a property that was not finished, and particularly not finished according to plans. You can't do that. If you do that, you are at risk. You need to take the developer to court. The other thing is the disingenuous way these photos are being used here today in front of us now. And I asked Mr. Rose to bring back the proper photos that he's taken, and particularly show the one that shows the site as it sits today. Now, of course, we've got to remember, the development has not yet had its landscaping, and it needs it. And this is what this application is about.
Yeah.
And saying that those properties at the back who are in cream are any less harmful than the properties just below them in white is also ridiculous. We can't retrospectively fit planning policy to a pre-planning NPPF application, which this was. It was demanded, it was needed at the time. I'm not happy with it, don't get me wrong, for many other reasons, but this is a straight, has to be accepted and approved. So when it gets when the refusal gets turned down, I hope we can approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it is extraordinary, isn't it? Because we did say back in June that there should be living walls, and that's why it was refused. Now it's come back, and you're going against a former decision. It makes a nonsense of any decisions that we make. Thank you for that, Councillor Howe. I didn't know whether Mrs. Shaw would want to come in and advise where we stand. I did ask for well, at least the proposal was made and it was seconded. So that still stands. But does Mrs. Shaw have any advice on the fact that we made that decision in June and now we're reversing it?
Yes, Chair. As previously said, yes, we would be open for a judicial review of any subsequent decision should the developer wish to. We have gone completely contrary unless there are material considerations which should change your recommendation, the decision of the council. I cannot advise as members how to vote. The motion before you is to recommend to the senior officer that the matter is refused, but costs could flow if there are no material changes in the situation before you. Thank you.
Thank you. In the light of that advice, Councillor Pratt and Councillor Woodward, would you like to make any comment, please?
I would, yes, Councillor Woodward. Well, just to say, first of all, I wasn't at the meeting in June, so I don't see that myself that I'm reversing any decision I made at that time. So I'm looking at it afresh as I see it this morning. However, I can see it does look very perverse if we were to say we didn't want it, or we only wanted it one way in June and then we reverse it now. And so I'm happy to withdraw my seconding of the proposal.
Thank you. Now, is there another seconder for after what you've heard, and the fact that it could cost our council quite a sum of money, is there still a seconder for the proposal?
Chair, could I just interject? It would only be if the developer were to make a claim. It's not automatically to flow. I must put that into the mix.
Yes, of course. That's a note of caution. But what would you do if you were a developer? Anyway, is there a seconder for Councillor Pratt's proposal, please? There is no seconder, so that proposal falls. Councillor Skinner.
Right, I think, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think on that basis, it would only be absolutely correct if I were to allow Councillor Howe, if he wanted to propose what he proposed. I'm merely going to actually support all of what he said. So I'm quite happy to second if Councillor Howe wanted to propose. Or
well, he hasn't proposed yet, and I'm taking the speakers, and somebody else might propose. Okay.
All right. Well, I'll propose then.
You've made your point. All right. Yeah. Fine.
I will propose. But what I would like to add, if you don't mind, Chair, is the things that Councillor Howe said, and all the things he said, he's absolutely bang on the money. What we can't do at this committee is start almost rediscussing, reissuing, looking at applications in a different way because it was different to what it was. And I'm sure that members don't mean to do that. And I'm sure I fully do understand the passion that Councillor Pratt has feels for this application. And I think actually, generally, if we could all go back to once upon a time, I think probably this committee wouldn't have allowed this application to go forward. That's fine. But that isn't where we are today. And where we are today is we've got to deal with where we are today. And this application that's in front of us, we can't start renegotiating or want to go back to renegotiate. We have a proper planning process. The officers deal with that process with other officers from the teams of which they work with, whether they're the tree surgeons or the tree.
Yeah, those points have been made with respect, Councillor Skinner. You've made a proposal. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
That was Councillor Howe?
No, Lawrence.
Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak on it?
Excuse me. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would just like to say that I think it's wrong for a developer to sell properties before planning conditions were actually adhered to. But I'm surprised that the purchaser's solicitors didn't highlight this at the time of when contracts were exchanged. Having said that, I think we would be made to look a mockery of this committee if we were to go back on the decision we made in June, because nothing has changed since then. And that's my reasoning for supporting Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. And the points have been made that it is a civil matter. It's been made several times. Councillor De Sarum.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you very much, Chair. I have listened very closely to this debate, and I believe if we check the records, I was at the meeting in June, which was referred to. And I think from what I can see from this meeting, we've got four main real issues which link together to address. Firstly is the integration of the buildings. Secondly, we have to address the finishing of the landscape. Thirdly, we have to have a duty to protect the AONB. And finally, we have to achieve better visual impact on the AONB. So I've understood what Councillor Pratt was saying, and I think it was very positive what he said, but quite clearly, we are where we are, to use that phrase. And so I will have to go along with what everyone has said thus far on this committee and support the recommendations purely because of the 4 points that I said. By doing this, we will protect the AONB and we will ultimately get a better visual impact for the site. Thank you so much indeed, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor De Sarum. Well put. Now, does anyone have anything new to add? Councillor Ollie Davey, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'd just like to point out, Chair, that maybe we have a bit more information than we had back in June about the living walls. We didn't really have any details of those, and obviously at the time it sounded as though the living walls were a much better option, but we've had some doubt cast on the effectiveness of those. I mean, I wonder what colour they'll go in the autumn. If you had Virginia Creeper up there, it would go beautiful colour in the autumn, but it would also stick out like a sore thumb. I'm sure they wouldn't use Virginia Creeper, and beautiful though it is, it can also have the same effect as ivy on a building.
Actually, no, that it doesn't. Interestingly, I looked at this quite some years ago, many years ago, and apparently that's where it differs from ivy. Councillor Chamberlain might know more about it, but I mean, the changing colours probably blend in with the landscape. Who knows? Anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, grass doesn't normally turn brown in autumn. Which trees and other things will. I'm just suggesting that we have dug ourselves into a bit of a hole, but I would also suggest that perhaps we have some more information about the living walls than we had in when the original application came in, and also than we had back in June. I'd just also like to make a point about the photos. It was suggested that the lower position of Councillor Pratt's two photographs, the second one, made the buildings look more conspicuous. I would have said it was the opposite, actually, that if anything, a higher position for the photograph would make the buildings look more conspicuous, because you can't see so much of the existing screening, some of which there is. And I do wonder why landscape, normally with a development like this, we would simply use some screening around the edge of the development to make it look less conspicuous, and I'm just wondering why that solution wasn't adopted. Perhaps there isn't, the topography doesn't allow for that. But yeah, I would just suggest that perhaps we have a little more information than we had back in June, and that perhaps gives us a little bit of wriggle room. But I'm undecided on this personally at the moment.
Okay. Chris Rose, would you like to make any comments regarding the planting?
So yeah, as I said before, the planting to the living walls has been agreed with the landscape architect, as is the wider planting of the site. And yes, it's I reiterate the concerns. It's a shame that the owners have been able to purchase these properties whilst the developer had carried out all of these changes and hasn't built it in accordance with the plans. But again, I'll reiterate that Chris Harrides, our landscape architect, has spent many hours on this scheme to make sure that the landscaping scheme that the developer will put in is the best that we can get and respects the topography of the site and the AONB. We have conditioned a landscaping scheme which reflects the changes on site, been agreed with the landscape architect, and actually is the same scheme that you as members accepted in June.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. And yes, the landscape architect, we've already said, very diligent, very committed, conscientious. Councillor Chamberlain, anything to add?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank goodness for that. We've got to a sensible position. I've sat and listened and I wholeheartedly agreed with Councillor Howe, sat here, would have spoken before if my name was up the list, but it wasn't. You'll remember back in the previous one that I very much supported these green walls and spoke about it in the previous meeting. And I am still in exactly the same position as I was then, just to reiterate that. There was no chance I was changing my mind with this application. It was the same as what it was back in June, and I still agree that these living walls need to be put in place. As to possible concerns with the buildings going forward with these living walls, I wholeheartedly agree. It's down to the developer to ensure that they are fitted properly, and that will be a civil case going forward with them. So I am so pleased we are in the correct position going forward, and I think with those and the landscaping that will then come in as well and mature over time, that this site then will actually look much better than it currently does. Virginia creeper and ivy, yes, they hold on to the material that they grow on and feed off of very differently. So you are correct in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do recall you were very concerned about the planting of ivy at the time. Right, Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I have got nothing further to say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Howe.
I just need to come back to what Councillor Davey said, because he said we have further information on the living walls. We don't. We have no further planning information on the living walls. What we have is civil information, which is between the builder, the developer, and the owners, not planning matters at all. And we need to be very careful and differentiate between the two. And that is why and I do apologise to the committee, I was just pulling my hair out here when it was going on. We need to be very accurate and very precise in what we do and make sure we are above board in all cases. I haven't liked this development for many years. I still don't like this development, but we have to do the right thing within the law and particularly within the planning rules and the planning we've got. So happy as I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Right, over to Mrs. Shaw to sum up, please.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, members. There is a motion to recommend to senior officers to approve, subject to the Section 106 requirements as set out in the report. Members, when your name is called, please would you indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. So I'll start with Councillor Brown.
Yeah, totally approve.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain.
Approve.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval and thanks to Councillor Howe.
Councillor De Saram.
Support the motion to recommend approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Support.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Abstain.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. The application has been recommended for officers' approval.
Thank you, Wendy. Agenda item 10 now. application 2014-36, full application, and 2014-37 listed building consent. It's a minor application for Ratcliffe Farm, Clisshiden, pages 57 to 87. I'd like to welcome Yestin John, objector. Is he in the meeting?
Yes, he is.
Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. Hope I got your name right. With Welsh mother, I should have, shouldn't I? Matthew Daltamarum, agent. And Councillor Walton Clisshiden Parish Council, and the ward member, Councillor Eleanor Rylance. Right, over to Chris to present his report. Chris Rose.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so Radcliffe Farm, Clisshiden, as you mentioned. So this is an application for conversion of a curtilage listed building to form 2 dwelling houses. So you can see the red line here of the site, so the building that's curtilage listed, and you can see the access, narrow access leading down to the road, which I'll show a photo of. The proposals here, because it's contrary to the view of the ward member. As I mentioned, the buildings here are curtilage listed, and the access leads onto a C road. So if we go through, you can see the scheme of the building here. And the access off to the side, and again the junction where we've got details of visibility displays that I'll mention in a minute. And these are the buildings to be converted. So as I say, curtilage listed old farm buildings, and they're proposing to convert them into these 2 dwellings with no new openings, very minimal change, no change to the footprint of the building. So a straight conversion of the buildings that you can see there. That says curtilage listed. And then if I just move on, so you can see the building, and then we've got the access. So this is the main road, if you like, for want of a better word. And then this photo is taken on the access into the site. And I've just moved. So this is the access. You can see single track. It's not part of the county highway. Rough surfaced. Again, and you can see the visibility. Sorry. There we go. So the access into the site. So in terms of the principle of development, there's support here. The MPPF itself says that we can support the conversion of buildings in the countryside, particularly where they are curtilage listed or listed buildings, and it retains those buildings in the best use for the future. That's not reflected in policy D8 of the local plan, but it is in the MPPF. So the principle of development in terms of converting and retaining and converting these curtilage listed buildings to residential is acceptable. You'll see in the report that the buildings are considered to be suitable conversion. They're structurally sound, and a survey's been submitted to demonstrate that. There's very minimal external alterations, and you'll see with the involvement of the conservation officer, there's support there for the design of the scheme. And it's not really visible from the public domain, as you can see from these photos, so no wider visual harm. But you'll see from the report and the objectors, there's a couple of issues that are raised. The first one is concerns about highway safety. So I need to point out that on the site already, if I go back to the aerial, there's consent on the site for 5 units already in other barns through the prior approval process, and a prior approval to go to a farm shop. So off this lane, you will have 6 properties and this farm shop, and that has raised concerns for local residents and the parish council about the suitability of this narrow access to serve that amount of traffic and the visibility at the junctions. And you'll see from the report that County Highways originally objected to the application on the basis of the information they had at the time on traffic flows, but they've now withdrawn their objection following further information from the applicant. So DCC Highways are satisfied that there's suitable visibility at this access and suitable space for a car to be pulling out whilst a car is pulling in. And whilst they acknowledge the other 5 dwellings and farm shop that's been approved up this single lane, they don't feel that the level of vehicles are harmful enough to justify refusal. And they've pointed out that there's been no accidents in this location in the past 21 years, or as far as the information goes back. So Devon County is satisfied with the access lane and the number of units being served, and there's 2 parking spaces for each dwelling. The other issue that's come up, you'll see from the report, relates to surface and foul drainage. There was a lack of information on this originally. The application was then, we sought further information in terms of foul drainage assessment. So there's no mains drainage here, so it will be discharged to soak away, and the foul drainage will have to be on the applicant's land. Note of concern from a neighbour about any discharge being on their land. We've sought confirmation from the drainage consultant that the details that they're proposing in terms of the treatment plant will cater for all of the uses and dwellings on the site, and that can be carried out within the applicant's ownership with a flow control device to ensure that it enters into once it's all treated, it then flows into a brook on the applicant's land. And you'll note from the report that we've got 2 conditions on there to deal with foul and surface water, just to ensure that they are carried out and don't harm the amenity of any neighbours. But at this moment in time, we've got the information we need to be able to be satisfied that can be provided. So we're therefore recommended approval on the basis it's protecting and reusing the Kirtleys listed building. It's good design. There's no wider harm. There are highway safety concerns, but Devon County Council aren't supporting a refusal of the application, and on the basis that the foul and surface water drainage has been dealt with, can be dealt with via condition. So due to that, we are recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mr. John, you have 3 minutes to speak. Would you like to begin?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the owners of Berry Farm, who have asked me to express their continuing concerns regarding some very particular issues to do with this proposal. This presentation follows a number of observations we have previously made on behalf of our clients during the application process. Berry's farm ownership includes a large overland to the north and immediately abutting the buildings within the applicant's ownership, including the application site. Our client's land is used for organic farming, is within a nitrate vulnerable zone, and is prone to flooding during wet weather. It is therefore particularly sensitive to potentially harmful drainage impacts which might arise from adjoining uses and new development. It is within this context that my clients wish to object to the proposals, and on the basis that the current drainage arrangements are neither satisfactory nor legally deliverable. Their concerns their concerns to that effect have been reiterated at various times during the application process. But despite more information having been submitted by the applicant, it's clear that this has not addressed the issues of concern to them. Under the arrangements now proposed, and which are summarised in the officer's report, both surface and foul drainage from the current scheme and from the previously approved developments, which amounts to 7 dwellings and a farm shop, are proposed to drain into a ditch which runs immediately to the north of the applicant's land. For foul drainage, it is a requirement that the treated effluent from a packaged treatment plant be into free-flowing watercourse. The ditch is actually routinely dry and cannot consider to be a watercourse sufficient to accept foul drainage effluent. More importantly, it should be noted that this ditch is not within the applicant's ownership. It is wholly within the freehold of Berry Farm, as land registry records show. The proposed solution, and therefore the scheme as a whole, is not legally deliverable. The submitted drainage surveys refer to discharging into a free-flowing brook on land in the full ownership of applicant. This is factually wrong. The proposed solution, which has been presented to and referred to by your officers, cannot therefore be accepted. We are aware that the applicant may have some pre-existing right to use surface water drainage culvert which crosses Berry farmland. However, this relates to an entirely different feature in a different location. Those rights do not in any event extend to foul drainage uses. Given the organic farming use, our clients cannot and will not accept any discharge for either foul or surface water purposes into their ditch, as this has potential to jeopardise the organic certification.
30 seconds remaining.
In recommending the approval for the scheme for approval, officers have considered the drainage issues to be acceptable. They have quite reasonably taken the applicant's submissions at face value. Unfortunately, the legal position is quite different. Therefore, whilst our client has no issue whatever with the principle of the scheme, neither this scheme or the others are deliverable. Until a proper solution is identified, the scheme is not capable of being approved, and we therefore ask it be refused or at least deferred. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. John. And can I please remind members to keep your microphones on mute unless you're speaking. There was quite a lot of background noise during that, which isn't really fair to the objector. Now the agent, Matthew Daltamarum, please, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Over the past few years, applications have been approved confirming that the existing buildings at the former intensive poultry farm can be converted to form 5 dwellings and a farm shop under permitted development rights. The applications before you today seek to convert a curtilage listed barn on the land to form 2 further dwellings. We have worked closely with officers to address various matters that have been raised during the application process. To address these matters, the applicant has engaged a professional highway consultant to prepare site surveys and reports confirming that the existing access is suitable to accommodate the wider development at the site. The reports confirm that the development would not harm the safety of the surrounding highway network, and on the basis of these reports, the Highway Authority has advised that it has no objections. The applicant has also engaged a professional drainage consultant who has prepared a drainage scheme showing that foul and surface water from the proposed development can be appropriately dealt with. We are thankful for the officer's assessment of the applications contained within the committee report, and we would agree with the recommendations. Planning legislation requires applications to be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In this instance, the proposal gains support from paragraph 80 of the NPPF, which supports developments in isolated countryside locations for the conversion of redundant and disused buildings, and where it represents the optimal viable use of a heritage asset. It is noted that in 2020, the council also approved the conversion of barns for residential use at Farrett's Hayes Farm to the north of the site on the same grounds due to support from the NPPF. As the committee report highlights, the buildings at Ratcliffe Farm would remain largely of the same form and design, except for the insertion of new windows and doors. The proposed design seeks to minimise changes to the historic fabric of the buildings as part of the conversion. Internally, the existing layout lends itself to residential reuse. These buildings are no longer fit for modern farming, and the supporting structural survey confirms the buildings to be capable of conversion to dwellings. Further, the Conservation Officer has confirmed support for the proposed development on the basis that it would secure the long-term future of the listed buildings and preserve their historic importance. In summary, it's considered there are no reasonable planning grounds on which to withhold the grant of planning permission and listed building consent for the proposed conversion of these heritage assets.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Consequently, we would respectfully request that members recommend approval of the applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Parish Councillor, Clis Hayden, Parish Councillor, Councillor Walton, please. You have 3 minutes. Councillor Walton? I know he's in the meeting.
Yeah, he's currently on mute at the moment.
Can you unmute, Mr. Walton?
I'm not unmuted. Sorry about that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Off you go. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council, which has submitted reservations about this application previously. Our main concerns are with the safety of the exit and entrance to the track that enters into the dwellings. We believe that there is going to be, if this proposal goes through, 7 dwellings and a farm shop, which will greatly increase the amount of traffic on the road so that things are not as they were 21 years ago when the accidents and emergencies were looked at. On the exit is onto an actual single track road next to a T-junction and a blind bend. And we feel that because the track access is a single access, there will be situations where traffic will queue up, causing people to come round the bend into a queue. We would like to say that we have seen the applications from the applicant, saying that they will change the displays to make it more visible. But our concern is that we think that the displays are not on their property and that would not go ahead. So we would like it to be at least important to make sure that the displays are changed before any building work can take place. With the large increase of vehicles in other areas, the major concern has been that the agricultural has ceased and there has been no vehicle access to this site for several years now, apart from to the Ratcliffe Farm listed buildings next door. We believe that with 7 dwellings, there'll be 14 vehicles, which an average use of a day would be at least 28 extra trips, probably more as they go out in the evenings and weekends. There would also be vans going to the farm shop and customers coming to the farm shop, and we didn't see any applications for parking for the farm shop. So wonder where the parking is going to take place, which would cause more queues on the road. The final safety feature that we have is that, sorry, that was the final feature is, so in summary, Clistheiden Parish Council feels strongly that the proposal to build 7 dwellings and a farm shop at Ratcliffe Barns greatly increases the risk of a serious accident on the entrance and exit onto our single track road.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. The narrow blind bend development exit and entrance site is of concern, and the large increase in vehicle activity. The lack of adequate parking space needs to be thought of before any proposals are accepted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walton. Now we move on to the ward members. Councillor Eleanor Rylance, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I probably should give some register of interest declaration first, I guess. I've had contact with Mr. and Mrs. Berrowford of Cliff House over the years about their concerns about this development. And also I have received voicemail and an email from Mr. Yestin John in the last few days. So I have 2 major areas of concern about this development. And I would like to preface this by saying that I'm not against the conversion of historic farm buildings per se. It seems like a very good reuse of farm buildings. However, we've been presented with a drainage plan that includes, that appears to link all the sewage plants together. So with your permission, Chair, I'm going to deal with the entire site sewage because it seems a coherent thing to do, given that they are linked together in the plans that we've had submitted. So what's proposed for this site is not just the conversion of 2 buildings, it's actually 7 dwellings and a farm shop. The dwellings, apart from these 2 historic farm buildings, will be in old poultry sheds, which are actually relatively still usable. So I wouldn't describe them as redundant farm buildings. They're not used presently, but they're not fit for purpose, if you see what I mean. So altogether, plus a farm shop, we're told will generate 5 cubic meters of wastewater every day. Now, what does the applicant plan for this wastewater? Well, the drainage report we have submitted in our PAG tells us that there's no chance of this wastewater permeating into the subsoil. The test was done, and the site, which is heavy clay, as it is at my house, it is absolutely impermeable. It did not soak away at all in the space of 4 hours. So the applicant has at the insistence, I guess, of our planning department, has provided a different alternative for the wastewater, which is to direct it to the northernmost left-hand side point of their site. And on the plan, you'll see that there's an arrow pointing off plan. That actually is pointing towards the neighbour's field. We've just been told by the neighbour's agent that the neighbours have not given permission for that and would never give permission for that. Being organic farmers, it's quite important they don't put any old thing on their fields. We're told by the applicant this is a free-flowing brook. Well, I searched through the Environment Agency maps and I could not find any sign whatsoever of any kind of brook at that location. My only conclusion is that this is a ditch, and we've just been told by the agents, Mr. and Mrs. Dixon, that actually the ditch belongs to their clients. So that is not up to the applicant to use to disperse the wastewater. But as an aside, even if this were a free-flowing brook, it's within striking distance of a pretty flood-prone river. Is this really the kind of stuff we want to be dispersing into the environment? I mean, I own a package plant. And honestly, I wouldn't want to drink what comes out of it. So I don't know if anybody else thinks that's a good thing to put into the environment, but I really don't. So I have massive concerns about the destiny of the wastewater from this site, considering that quite a large part of it is safe to assume will be hard standing or paved. And obviously there'll be probably a lot more people generating a lot more water. So the ecological impact of this site is going to be higher than it is at present. I think it's fairly safe to assume. And we don't have a clarity on what's going to happen to the treated effluent, for want of a better word. It quite clearly can't go onto an organic field. That's not possible. It's not going to soak away because the ground's not suitable. Furthermore, while we're on the subject, I've had a message from Mrs. Barrowford at Ratcliffe House, who's very concerned because historically, the package plant, the sewage treatment plant for their house is actually in that yard. Now, that's actually not on the plans. You can't see that it's there because it's not on any of the plans. So their manhole covers and their treatment plant is actually in the middle of that yard. That's been there for absolutely decades. It's in the deeds of their
30
house.
seconds remaining.
And I know tried to make contact with the applicant and not managed to make headway with it. Okay, thank you, Wendy. Okay, so the highways. I was surprised to see the change in tone of highways, and to see that we have in effect speed limits. Now, this is a country road out in the sticks. A national speed limit applies. If somebody wanted to drive along there at 60 miles an hour, they'd be perfectly entitled to do that legally. So I don't know what this in effect speed limit is and why we only need a visibility of 43 meters, because it gets quite damp around there, and I can assure you that it's actually quite slippy. So I'm asking you to turn this down, please, because on so many grounds, it is going to cause a lot more problems, and it's not something that we need to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Could I go back to the agent, please? Mr. Dalton-Aram, would you address the concerns that's just been raised by Councillor Rylance, please?
Well, I will do my best to raise some of the issues. I mean, you would appreciate that a lot of these issues have been tabled at this meeting without any notice. I wasn't aware that it was Mr. and Mrs. Dixon of Berry Farm who, had an objection to this. We just, we're aware that it was concerned local residents. But anyway, I suppose that's by the by. To take it back a step, I think possibly the point that's being missed here is that this application is actually for the conversion of the existing curtilage listed buildings to 2 dwellings. That's what planning permission and listed building consent have been submitted for. So that is the assessment for these applications. What we've sought to do with the planning officer, who to be fair has been very kind of patient, and these applications have been in for well over a year now, and I suppose we could have gone to appeal if we wanted to, but we'd prefer to work with officers. This application is for 2 dwellings. The remainder of the scheme has been confirmed as permitted development under classes Q and R of the permitted development order. So that essentially already can happen, in separately to these 2 applications. So I think that's the first point to make. We have engaged highway consultants, a highway consultant, a drainage consultant to show a in principle scheme. I mean, the matters of drainage, there's a condition attached or proposed to be attached to both of these permissions, or the planning permission for further detail to be agreed prior to the works happening. So I think that point needs to be addressed. So they're my initial comments.
Thank you. Right, now we go to Councillor Chamberlain, the other ward member, and you have unlimited time.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure that I can add much more than what's already been added, really, in all honesty. I am concerned, like Councillor Rylance. I agree that it's great to see these buildings brought back into use, and that is very important. But this application, I'm not sure that actually Mr. Dalton-Marham actually answered part of Councillor Rylance's questions then, but actually went around it. But never mind, moving on. There are issues with the drainage and things there for the existing house next door, and that is a major concern that quite possibly hasn't been looked into. So I haven't really got any more to add. I'm not sure I agree on this application, so I'd like to see what the other committee members have to say about it, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we move into debate, can I ask Mr. Rose if he'd like to come back, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the drainage issues, the agent's right that we've got an application here for conversion of a building to 2 dwellings, and that's what we should be focusing on. And with regard to the drainage element, we have asked and we've received information from the applicant to show that technically they can come up with the scheme, and that covers all of the 7 units and the other PDR application. But there seems to be some doubt in terms of, certainly from the objector side, to the ownership of where that might discharge into. But as far as I'm aware, both parties seem to be saying, so the applicant and the objectors, that they have a right to discharge into this ditch. So what we have done in this case is we've put conditions on the application to cover surface water drainage and foul drainage. And we think that's appropriate because the scheme in itself is acceptable. I don't think we should be refusing an application on the basis of a lack of those details, certainly when they can be conditioned. And the situation will be that the applicant, and of course the agents hearing the concerns of the neighbours, will need to go away and come up with a suitable foul and drainage scheme to submit to us for approval. And they're going to have to submit the scheme that obviously is fully within their control, because otherwise they won't be able to implement the scheme and they'll get themselves into all sorts of civil matters. So I suppose in a roundabout way, what I'm saying is we believe that technically a scheme can be done, but I think it's appropriate that we condition that those schemes, the foul and surface water, get submitted to us for our approval. And obviously the applicant's going to have to come up with a scheme that doesn't discharge into somebody else's ditch if it is their ownership. Or ultimately, if they can't come up with a scheme, they won't be able to implement the permission. But what I'm saying is I don't think this is an area where we should be refusing planning permission when we can simply cover it by condition and deal with it at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Right, then thank you for that. That was helpful. We move into debate now, and Councillor Skinner's first.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I made my declaration of interest at the beginning of I rented these buildings. I wonder whether I did or not, and I did many years ago, and I catalogued the building. So I actually know this site extremely well, although it was many years ago, but obviously the buildings haven't changed. I think if there's a question I could ask through you, Chair, if you don't mind, to Mr. Matthew Dalton-Aaron, and that is the ownership of is the applicant, do they have ownership of Ratcliffe House, is the first question. Mr.
Does the applicant have ownership to Ratcliffe House?
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question is because Ratcliffe House also has and I know you can get through, or used to very much be able to get through the 2 buildings, it also has an access onto the road which comes out right opposite the turning that goes down towards Cliff St. Lawrence. So do they have access through the other access? Would they be able to have that, or is that not on?
When you say they, I mean, firstly, the applicant doesn't own Ratcliffe House, no.
Right, okay, that's enough. Okay, that's right. That's enough for me. That answers that question. So it shuts that one down. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Then we are looking at on the plan on page 57 of our plan, what's in red, that is the only access which Mr. Rose has on the screen in front of us, is the only access in and out of this particular site. And I take it certainly for this application here. There seems to be, from what is being said by Councillor Rylance and one or two others, is that there's also other dwellings that have planning permission that are also going to use this access and going to come out onto this site, onto this road. Is that correct?
That question to me again?
Yes, yeah, just to be sure. I just want to be sure of my ground before I get into my speech. I need to be sure of my ground, what I'm saying.
This is the only access to the site, and there are, if this application is approved, there will be 7 dwellings and a farm shop in total.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Okay, right. Okay, so I just wanted to clear those things up through you, Chair, because I just wanted to be sure of my ground. Looking at this application and the way it's been presented to us and put forward to us, there seems to be from the ward members that there could be, and certainly from Mr. Liston Jones, there could be limitations as to how this can be actually delivered. I think those questions, and the question I very much wanted to ask Mr. Rose, and through you, Chair, you managed to ask Mr. Rose and got in front of me and asked him about the issues of the drainage. And I think if the drainage issues are covered off through the conditions of this planning application, and the fact that I'm looking at this site, no doubt there could be improvements to the actual type of road that we have here, and knowing the site that it is, 7 dwellings and even a farm shop, although it's going to be relatively, I would have thought, limited and relatively small. I don't actually have an issue with that. And in fact, highways don't have an issue with that. In fact, highways looked at it twice because they had an issue to start with. They obviously went back and had another look, and then they didn't have an issue with the site. So highways
we're just dealing
with
this application, Councillor Skinner, not the principle of whether there should be 7 dwellings and a farm shop. Just this application, please.
Yeah, and I'm pulling it all together because actually through you, Chair, actually what is being mentioned here through the ward members, if they are adding the other sites to this particular application, saying bringing up the numbers to make sure that we all understand that, and that's absolutely fine. So as far as I'm concerned, this application and the way it's set out and the way it's proposed and the way of having the buildings and going forward, I don't have a problem with this application, and I will be going along with the officer's recommendation on this application, and I will be approving as is set out now, and suggesting I'm going to put the motion of approval for this application and see if I get a seconder. Thank you very much.
Are you putting the proposal, Councillor Skinner?
Yes, that's what I've just said.
Right, is there a seconder, please?
Councillor Desarum, happy to second it, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Desarum, would you like to speak on it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I was going to speak on it. I think that the key point here is that we have policy support from it in the NPPF under para 80, as the agent has said. It will also secure the long-term future of this particular site. And I'm aware, as Councillor Rylance and others have said, that the site is located in open countryside. But clearly, as we've heard, there has been, from the point of view of highways, there's been no accidents in 21 years duly recorded. And we have heard that the applicant has gone to get the appropriate foul drainage sorted out. And Mr. Rose mentioned that we would be able to put conditions on it, and that they would need to make sure that they could comply with this to make it fully within their control. So basically, I think that what we have seen is a very positive scheme that has come forward, and I think that we have to support it for those very positive reasons put forward. So for those reasons, Chair, I'm happy to second the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Desarum. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, speaking to the application on our paperwork, I'm happy to support the application, Chair, because I think the design is not going to be altered that much, and it will protect the listed building. It will provide extra housing for people in the countryside, and I'm happy. I take on board the comments that have been made about the foul drainage, etc. And I take on what Mr. Rhodes has said, is that obviously that can be conditioned. So I'm happy with that. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just go back to the proposer and seconder? I assumed that you were recommending approval for both applications, for the listed building as well as the application itself.
As far as I'm concerned, Madam Chair, yes, Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
yes, that's right, yes.
That's okay with both of you.
Yes, I concur with Councillor Skinner. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Right. Can I go back to Mrs. Shaw? Did you want to have some input?
Thank you, Chair. That was just what I was going to ask over in the seconder as well. You preempted me. Thank you.
Sorry, I should have made the assumption in the first place, but the two go hand in hand, I think. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose I've got a question for Mr. Rose and possibly Mrs. Shaw. We have a checkered history in the past with foul water drainage and everything else. And in principle, I have no problem with this application. But I just want to know if we've learnt lessons and whether they can give me the reassurance that in the past where we've approved matters with foul water drainage, etc., opened a condition, they found they've not been able to comply with the condition and then come back with other schemes that are a lot less favourable. And I'm thinking of Limpstone in particular, Mr. Rose and others like that. But we've been forced into allowing less favourable options because they got the planning permission. I hope you understand where the question I'm asking, because I've made a bit of a ham fist about it, but I'll go and have a sit down and a coffee in a minute. But if you could, Mr. Rose, possibly Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Howard, and obviously there's particular issues in Limpstone with capacity and connections, etc. A bit unique that, and yes, we have and are learning from what's happened there. I think this is slightly different because there's no sort of wider issue here. It's more about how it deals with this site rather than how it connects in with any other capacity. But I think it is difficult. It is an area that isn't our area of expertise, and ultimately does come down to some civil issues. And then to confuse this even further, the farm shop and the other 5 dwellings were through a prior approval process where we had no control or involvement over the foul or surface water at all, which makes this even more complex. But yes, ultimately, the applicant's going to have to submit to us 2 schemes, foul and surface water, that's on their land or in land in their control. And if they can't do that, then they won't be able to go ahead with the scheme. So I'm as satisfied as I can be.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a lot to add. I think the foul drainage element is covered by condition 10. It clearly says there can't be any pollution of any land or water course. And in any case, I think the ownership of the land is a civil matter. I quite understand the concerns about traffic and the blind bend and queuing, but that's not particularly pertinent to this application. We're only being asked to approve 2 homes. The other buildings on the site and the other development on the site is not what we're actually making a decision on. As Chris has said, that was already approved. So we have to bear in mind that it's only the 2 additional homes that we are looking at here. Obviously it's development in the open countryside, and personally I have some concerns over sustainability and the increase in traffic from that, but I think as has been stated, that is overcome by the fact that it is the reuse of actually a curtilage listed building, I believe, rather than an actual listed building. But even so, it's a building that probably would be allowed to tumble down, otherwise it's an attractive building, and it does help to preserve it for the future. And as somebody pointed out, provide a couple of extra homes. So I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. I think it's been mentioned quite a few times about the cumulative effect of the development, but you're quite right. We've got to look at this one in its entirety. Right, over to you, Mrs. Shaw. Do you want to take them both at the same time, or?
No, Chair, if we could take them separately,
Okay.
as they are separate applications and members have to put their minds to them separately. Therefore, members, you have for the first application, which is 20, 21, 14, full. I think I might have got that wrong. For the full application, planning application, if you have a motion to recommend to adopt the appropriate assessment as set out in the report and to recommend the approval with conditions as also listed in the report. When your name is called, will you please indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. So I'll start with Councillor Brown.
Yeah, support approval.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support approval.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Saran.
Support motion to recommend approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Whibley.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. That application is recommended for officers' approval.
And members, if we can now move on to the listed building consent. You have a motion to recommend approval with the conditions as listed in the report. Please, again, when you are called, indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Brown.
Support approval.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support approval.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Saran.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Support.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. So the listed building consent is also recommended for officers' approval.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to the speakers for your input today. Thank you very much. Right, now we go to agenda item 13, application 21-1101, full. It's a minor application for flat 2, Stanmore, 36 Beer Road, Seaton, pages 103 to 113. Now there are 2 objectors to this application. So welcome to Bernard Hanson, Wendy Bowdry, and to Joe Beckett, the applicant. Thank you. And over to Chris to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, we're dealing with a scheme at flat 2 Stanmore, 36 Beer Road in Seaton. So you can see the site here. So we've got an upper flat, and then we've got the garden area to the rear. So you can see the garden to this unit is split between the ground floor flat and the first floor flat. And we've got a scheme here for a loft conversion that it proposes roof lights to the front, a rear dormer window, and office in the garden to the rear, which I'll show you in the plans. The application's been amended since it was originally submitted. So there was originally a front dormer window proposed. That's no longer proposed as a roof light. And the rear dormer originally had a Juliet balcony associated with it, but that's also been removed from the scheme. And it's before you because there's ward member objections. And the town council have raised concerns about a business use of the office garden, but this is a garden to a flat, so it would be an office ancillary to the main use of the dwelling or the flat. And they have raised concerns about overlooking from the Juliet balcony, which, as I mentioned, has been removed from the scheme. So This is the layout of the site. So existing, you've got the garden to the ground floor, walkway to the garden to the flat number 2, and they are proposing this studio in the rear, and you can see the elevations of it. So single story, split into 2 offices and a den and a common area with a toilet. So that's the office element at the back. And then in terms of the proposal, we've got this Velux window to the front of the property to enable the loft conversion. And then we have this dormer window to the rear to enable the use of the upper floor there. And these are the views from the side, so you can see the side profile of the dormer window. So these are the aerials. So it's this unit here. We're just outside of the conservation area, which encompasses these buildings here to the south. This is the application plot, and you can see the garden to the ground floor flat, and then the application site itself here. And to the rear of the site, there's a footway, public open space footway that walks through to a larger development. And part of this proposal also shows a gate in the rear here to get access off that lane, although they also have access down the side of the property. So these are the photos of the area. You can see dormer to a nearby property. This is the application site here, this property. And again, this property here. So you can see quite a nice, well-designed property. And this is the rear elevation, so where the dormer window is proposed, and obviously the garden off to the right. And this is the view from the garden. So back towards the house, the flat 1's garden behind this fence, and this is the application site where the home office is proposed in the garden. So it's in the built-up area boundary. The dormer to the front has been removed. There were concerns about the visual impact of that on the street scene. And as I mentioned, the Juliet balcony to the rear has been removed, so that there's just a dormer window proposed that's also been reduced in size. The principle of the development is acceptable. It's in the built-up area boundary, very close to the town centre, within walking distance of the services and facilities. And as I mentioned, there's no concern with providing an office in a rear garden, and we would condition that would be ancillary to the house. So I appreciate concerns from the town council that might be a separate business, but that isn't what is being applied for, and that's not what would be consented. It would simply allow the occupiers of the flat to use it as an office space. The removal of the front dormer has aided the character, so no concerns there about the impact on the front. There's limited public views of the rear here. There is some from the public footpath around, but it's viewed in association with the trees and planting and the other buildings that are there. So there's no concern about the impact from the dormers or in fact from the single story office building. And there's, as you can see, there'd still be half of this garden area left for the occupiers, which is considered to be more than reasonable. In terms of privacy, appreciate there's concerns from the neighbours about the introduction of a dormer window in the roof slope, but that isn't uncommon in the area. I mean, I think you can see a dormer window in that photo, and the previous photo I showed you of a dormer of the property just further up. And sorry, just this is the photo from this footpath at the rear that they're wanting to put an access gate into. So just going back, the dormer window won't be out of character with the area. There are a number of dormer windows there. And whilst there will be an element of more overlooking from this dormer window, it's no greater levels than you get from overlooking from the first floor of the adjoining properties at the moment. And certainly not a level of overlooking that could justify refusal. And there'd be no overlooking from the office because there'd be the office faces to the left of this picture. So there'd be no windows looking back towards the main property. So no impact to privacy isn't harmful enough to justify refusal. And again, the office building here is 2 meters to the eaves, 3 meters at maximum at height, so single story. So it's not of a scale or size that would be overbearing to the neighbours to a point that we could justify refusal. And I think it's pertinent to note that a building of a very similar size would have been PD had this been a house rather than it being a flat. And there's no adverse impact from that we feel we can justify refusal on. There will be a construction impact, but that will be short term, and it's for the applicant to manage. There's no concern about a rear access gate. There's none at present, but adjoining unit has it. So as long as they get the rights to cross and use it, which is a civil matter, then there's no visual concerns about putting a gate in a fence. There's no need for extra parking for the unit, but as I said, it is well located, and in any case, literally a couple of stones throws down the road, there's a public car park. So in light of all of that, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I have to ask, Councillor Pratt, were you here for the whole of that presentation? Councillor Pratt?
Yes, Chair, I am here. I was here throughout it.
Thank you, thank you. Need a confirmation of that. Right, the objectors now. Bernard Hanson. Bernard Hanson here?
He is in the meeting. He's currently on mute at the moment.
Mr. Hanson, could you unmute? And welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Firstly, from my perspective, the impact on the property is not as described by Chris Rose. I believe that the dormer window does impact upon my privacy. Also, the back gate impacts upon my security. The fence between our two properties are low level, and there is security issues there with someone coming in the back gate. I believe it's oversized for the development of a 3-bedroom property. It's not their main residence, it's a holiday home. It's only been occupied for 20 days of the last 90. That may not concern EDDC, but it does concern me. There is no access for the emergency services. There is no access for fire brigade and no access for first responders. I have a statement from Thelma Clark, who is the occupant of flat 1. This is a statement from both her and her solicitor. In the plan that you showed, Chris, the outline was for the front and back garden, and this will respond to that. Being a joint freeholder and leaseholder, I am refusing permission for any alteration to the roof. Furthermore, the front garden is my property, and I will not allow any building materials or workmen to join that to work on that property and for unloading of building materials or anything else. The plan on the exact summary is incorrect, as I've said. There is no more of a development for a holiday lets in future, impacting on sewage and waste, on domestic waste. These haven't been considered by the EDDC, I don't believe, and they should be. Furthermore, the lawful aspect of this from Scott Rowe of Axminster and Lyme Regis purely shows that they do not have permission from flat 1 as the joint leaseholder and the joint freeholder to access the roof in any way, shape or form. And therefore, this should be rejected on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. I'd like to go to Chris Rose, please, for any points that you might have picked up on there, which are to be considered and which are not material planning consideration.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so whilst I heard what Mr. Hanson said about the access and works to the roof, then they're civil matters between the leaseholder, freeholders of the flats. It doesn't stop us considering the application or even granting planning permission, but obviously if there is a right there that they've got to withhold the works being done, then they wouldn't happen, and that's the strongest position that the freeholder of that property could be in. But it doesn't stop us granting planning permission for the scheme, because ultimately some agreement could ultimately be reached, and that also may be why the applicant's proposing to put a gate in the fence at the rear here. But again, there's no concerns from that from a visual impact point of view. It'll be a small gate in a run of an existing 1.5 metre roughly fence, and obviously that can be padlocked and secured. So I understand the concerns raised about access, but they're civil matters, not for us to consider as part of the planning application.
Yeah, I think that's what certainly what I and other members will probably think, but thank you for that clarification, it's helpful. Wendy Bowdry, you have 3 minutes. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate to the committee that that there have been detailed letters of objection compiled on our behalf through LRJ planning, which clearly says about the harmful effects of this build, particularly the build in the back garden. And I don't feel that that's been particularly considered by the committee, any of the adverse effects on any of the neighbouring properties. I don't think the applicant has been totally honest in our application, as it's never been mentioned that this is in fact a second home. And why a second home would need an office of that magnitude is somewhat bewildering. We in principle wouldn't object to an office in the garden, but this isn't an office. It is a self-contained annex that can operate independently from the main building, and at a later stage a separate application for change of use could be lodged, and this is our main concern with this application. I feel that all the way through this planning application, the description of these offices has been changed. It's been offices, it's been studio. When the amendments went in, nothing went in to amend the size and the magnitude and bulk of that proposed office complex in the garden. The thing that worries us as neighbours is the future of this area. If you go back and look at the aerial plan, you can see that this area actually has unspoilt. We don't have buildings in the back gardens. There's a lot of green space behind, and we particularly, and as the neighbours here, bought in this area because it isn't in the densely overbuilt up part of Seaton, and it's been enjoyed as such. And to our mind, this would open up the floodgates for all the gardens being cut in half, and similar builds put on the back of all the properties in this area, which would open up an unwelcome precedent, which I'm sure EDDC would be adverse to.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, would you like to respond to any of those points, please?
Yeah, so I understand the residents' concern about the second home issue, but again, that's irrelevant from a planning perspective. We need to consider the impact of the scheme and whether it's the only home, a second home, a third home. We've got to look at the impact of the use of the visual impact of the changes and the use of it. And as members will be aware, given lockdown and COVID, it's more and more common now that people are working at home. I'm doing it myself now, and it's more and more common for people wanting to have an office environment that's away from their main living accommodation. So we're seeing lots of these proposals. It's not unusual. It's the sort of thing the government are supporting. And I think you can see from the aerial here that there are other buildings in gardens at the back here. I understand the concern about it becoming too much, but it is the sort of thing that's more and more common nowadays. And in terms of it becoming some sort of separate unit or holiday accommodation, well, that would need further planning permission, and we'd have to consider that at that time.
But once the building's there, there's no way of policing its usage. But apart from that, there's been a lot.
I'm sure you would let us know if there was something untoward going on.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would.
There's been lots of mention in the press about use of second homes and the detrimental use of second homes.
Yeah, I'll stop you there, please. We're not getting into that argument here. We're dealing with this application only. Thank you. Applicant Joe Beckett, please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to just give some reasoning and background.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Hi, I'm Jo Beckett. Just saying thank you very much to Chris for giving an outline of the proposal. And I just thought it would be helpful just to give you some reasoning behind the development and what our intention is. So you've got the sort of bigger picture. I've been coming to the area for 56 years. My parents had a place in Beer. We've got family close by in Exeter and Somerset. My son, I've been bringing him to the area for 22 years. He's autistic and has severe learning difficulties, and he really loves the outdoor and active lifestyle that the area provides. And we've always wanted to get a home in the area so that he could access the area more. Our intention is once the home is functional for us that we will live there. So the second home thing isn't an issue. We have no intention to do holiday lettings from the garden. The current situation is I work 100% of the time from home. I do online training with schools and I do online forums and coaching. At the moment, I'm working in the back bedroom of the house, which doesn't feel very professional. It's not functional. And I do actually overlook the 3 gardens at the moment from my bedroom office. My husband runs his own business. He refurbishes and maintains people's properties. He does very different things in his office to what I'm doing in my office. My son needs a separate space. He often gets overwhelmed. He's very sensitive to noise. He benefits from music therapy and just sort of, calming down. So there's a separate space for him in this studio office. It's really important we have a toilet there because my son struggles with his continence. And when he needs to go to the toilet, he needs to go quickly and he needs to go frequently. And equally, when I'm doing training, I could be training for a whole day and maybe just have a minute between, comfort break. So the toilet's really important. What I would say is at the moment, the kitchen window and the back bedroom window overlooks all the gardens, whereas I think the garden office won't actually overlook. The square footage, the proposed garden office is 48 metres squared, a total garden size of 168 metres squared, which is 29%.
30 seconds remaining.
29% of the total garden. So there should be minimal impact, no loss of privacy. And it's really to create a family space. The loft is to create a family space for us. We've got a small dining room lounge at the moment, and we've got 4 children who are grown up, but still like to come and visit us. So that's really the reasoning and intention behind our application.
Thank you very much, Jo Beckett. I'm going to call Councillor Joe Whibley next in the light of what's just been said, because he might have further information.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I was going to actually ask Chris Rose a couple of questions regarding where we stand in terms of who can have, the final say over whether or not works happen, given the whole freehold leasehold situation. But he's answered that, so thanks, Chris.
Yes.
In terms of the explanation as to what the property is to be used for, I know it's not something that we can necessarily concern ourselves with, but that all of that in terms of because I work with people with sort of learning difficulties like that and have done for many years. That all sounds entirely reasonable and exactly the sort of thing that people in that situation would need. So as much as there's clearly an issue between the bottom flat and the top flat, as has been said, that's a civil issue. In terms of the development itself, I can't see as if we have any reason other than to support this. Thank you, Chair.
So are you making that a proposal, Councillor Whibley?
Yes, I think I am.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Yep, I'll second it.
Thank you. Go ahead then, Councillor Skinner.
I see no reasons to be objecting to this application. Lots of things have been said. The questions I was going to ask Chris Rose and others have answered, so I don't think I got any more to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And currently, I think most of us are using our homes as offices for obvious reasons. Councillor De Sarum, anything to add?
I was just going to say that it's very good to hear that the applicant wants to use the space to create a family space. And I'm sure that will be a very positive attribute for her. And she has justified the fact that they are going to live there and they have no intention of a holiday let. So I think a lot of those questions that the objectors raised have been clearly answered. And as Mr. Rose said, it's very hard to justify a refusal for such a situation that we face. So that's all I had to say on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And as one of the speakers said earlier, one of the objectors, the home has only been in use for a limited number of days recently. Councillor Ollie Davey, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we don't have any details on how the the sewerage and power are going to be supplied to the Home Office, and I'm just wondering, do we need that, and should it be conditioned, or maybe Chris could just comment on that?
Chris, a quick comment.
Yeah, we don't go into that level of detail
No.
for this type of application. That they're going to have to either have a a separate toilet that they deal with the waste in, or if they can connect it with the correct agreement of all the relevant parties.
Thank you. No more speakers. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you have a motion to recommend approval with the conditions as set out in the report. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate you're in support of the motion to recommend approval, against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. So I'll start with Councillor Brown,
Yes, support approval.
Councillor Chamberlain,
Support approval.
Councillor Davey,
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum,
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard,
Support.
Councillor Howe,
Approve.
Councillor Key,
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence,
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt,
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner,
Support approval.
Councillor Whibley,
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward,
Support approval.
and finally Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. So that application is recommended for officers' approval.
Thank you. And thank you to the speakers who came along. Thank you. Right, we go to agenda item 9 now. Application 2058. It's a major full application, Otter Falls, Old Spurton Farm, New Road, Appletree, pages 33 to 56. And we just have the committee ward members. I don't mean to demean you. We do have the committee ward members to speak on this. And over to Chris for his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, we're at a site called Otter Falls near Ottery, and you can see the extent of the ownership of the site of the land in blue and the areas that the application relates to in red. And it's an application proposing holiday accommodation units comprising of 12 what are called glamping pods and 3 holiday lodges. It's before you because technically it's a departure from the local plan because they are proposing permanent new structures in the AONB, which I'll come on to mention, and it isn't a highly accessible location. But they are there's already a holiday accommodation on this site that you can see around the ponds here. So it's a holiday accommodation park. It already has an access, and they're proposing new parking as part of the scheme. So you can see the layout here already. There's a number of units, and in effect, they want to put 3 more holiday lodges in addition to the ones they've got. And then on a field here, these glamping pods. So this is, sorry, it's not very clear, but these are the 3 units. And then you've got the glamping pods in this sort of area here and plant some of the planting. And they're proposing to do it in 3 phases, as you can see there. So these are the glamping pods, bit grand, but they're grand word, sorry. So they're the elevations of them. So you can see sort of timber construction, there we go, to be used on the site. And also then we've got the holiday lodges, which match the appearance of the holiday lodge, or similar to the holiday lodges that are already on the site. So this is the access, or one of the main accesses that leads down into the site, which is off in the distance here behind the trees. I can show you lots of photos from surrounding, but the reason I'm really showing them is you can't see the site from anywhere surrounding, despite the fact it's in the AONB. You can see the extensive tree covering around the site, and that's the existing lodges. Sorry, that's a bit blurred. And then we get to parts of the site where the lodges are proposed, and again, you can see all the screening that's around the site that prevents you from being able to see it from any of the public rights of way or areas. Again, is an example from the applicant's submission. So the glamping pods are down in amongst those trees there, and you might just be able to make out the existing lodges through this tree boundary. So we've got, in terms of the principle of development, there's a Luppet neighbourhood plan being prepared, but it's at early stages, so we can give that little weight. But we have got policy E19 of the local plan that supports holiday accommodation parks and the extension of those parks. But it does say that there shouldn't be any new permanent structures in the AONB. It's quite harsh to say no new permanent structures, but obviously it's there to try and prevent any harm to the wider AONB, any wider visual impact. The site's close, fairly close to Rawridge. So in terms of sustainability terms, and given that there's an existing facility there, we're happy with the location. With regard to the permanent structures, although this is contrary to E19, as you can see the very quick run through of those photos and the one on the screen, you won't be able to see these buildings in the landscape at all. So from that point of view, although they're new permanent structures, there's going to be no harm to the AONB, and it's not a major development, so we don't need to assess it being able to go elsewhere. The designs of the units are acceptable. As I said, it's well screened. There's new tree planting going into the site, and the landscape architect's been involved in this application as well to make sure that there's suitable tree planting. There's some replacement tree planting for some older, poorer species. And also, you'll see in the report, we've got to weigh in that there are economic benefits from this. Obviously, home tourism or in the UK has been the big thing this summer, and this will be one of those things that draws people into the district and will have the economic benefits associated with it. You'll see in report that Highways DCC are satisfied that there won't be any harm from the extra traffic, and there are electric charging points being proposed in the scheme. It's 200 odd meters to the closest residence, so there'll be no concern or a wider impact from it from those point of view. So although it's contrary to the local plan in terms of proposing permanent structures in the AONB, we're recommending approval of the application on the basis of the economic benefits, no other harm, and on the basis that you won't be able to see these further units that are there to develop out this existing site. So recommending approval for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Just a question that came into my mind when I was reading the papers. How much weight would the Blackdown Hills Management Plan carry at any appeal? I'm not talking about this particular application, any appeal.
Yeah, so it's a document that's prepared by the AONB team, and it's adopted, if you like, for planning purposes. So it would carry quite a degree of weight in the decision making process, and it rightly talks about protecting the AONB, and that's why policy E19's got this, no permanent structures bit in there. But when you won't be able to see it from any part of the AONB, then that's why we're supporting.
That's fine. Okay, right, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this, I will argue with Chris on one little bit when he said it can't be seen from anywhere. This can be seen from certain vantage points. I mean, if you go over to the top end of Monkton, you can look across and see the site, because it does, it is visible from there. The same as it's visible if you go across the Moon's Ottery over at Lappet, you can see the site. But but I've got no objections to this, even though it's been increased by 50%. But what we have got to get is the light, like it says in section 4 of the recommendations. The lighting must be approved, and the amount of time you leave the lighting on in the driveways or car parks, etc., must be approved for this. And I am in agreement as well with the electric charging points, which I think is a good thing and might even encourage people to go there, because the nearest charging points from there are probably 5 or 6 miles away in each direction. So yes, I'm in favour of this, even though it's a 50% increase in the size of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And lighting is covered in condition 4. Yeah. Thank you. Right, Councillor Skinner.
I think is Councillor Key going to speak?
Yeah.
Well, I was hoping that I was going to be asked to speak.
You're the ward member,
sorry,
Councillor.
David.
You go first.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, yes, I mean, the first thing that I did when this application came out was actually notify them that this actually, the address should be New Road up Luppet, not up Ottrey.
Okay.
But anyway, yes, I mean, I think this is going to be a very, very good improvement there. It's going to be in the trees. Close at hand. I mean, yes, I mean it can be visible from much higher points, but I mean from lower points it can't be hardly seen at all because it's going to be in the trees there. Now, with regard to the traffic, I think the people in Rawridge were a bit concerned about the amount of traffic that it might increase in it. But in actual fact, I live on one of the roads out of Upottree that go onto the A30, and there is as many, if not more, of the roads come into the village and up to the A30 than what there are that actually go through Rawridge. So I honestly don't think that Rawridge is going to be very much affected by the extra traffic. I did say in my point that the only lighting should be that's a metre high on pillars with the light, the small light actually in the pillar, because the last thing we want is light pollution and large lights there. And I think that they are quite happy with that sort of thing. But yes, I mean I'm more than happy to put forward the recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Right, is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner, now you can go.
Yeah, thank you. And the reason I second that is because I take great heed from a report such as this and what Mr. Rose and his team have put together, because although it looks like it could fly in the face of some of our policies, in actual fact, when you look at it in the grand scale of things, it really doesn't. And when we see great sustainability and all these other things, what we're trying to create is an environment, I think, in the AONB that people can enjoy. And just occasionally schemes like this come up, and I just want to very much support these schemes and the detailed conditions that go with it. What's fundamentally important, through you, Chair, if you don't mind, what's fundamentally important with schemes like this is the conditions and the points that Councillor Key and both Councillor Key and Councillor Brown made about lighting and us not having light pollution in schemes like this when we are in the AONB is really, really important. And the guys that have worked this out, when you look how comprehensive this is in the conditions, they've really wanted to make this work, but actually condition it down so it doesn't become, if you might call it, a sort of have an urban feel to it. It really doesn't. It has a real rural feel to it. And this is what I call a really progressive way of looking forward, working with where we are, working how we're going forward and engaging the AONB with other people to enjoy as well. Very much support it, very much behind it.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that for me, when I looked at it, on page 49 of our report, it says the glamping pods clearly are provided in a somewhat tranquil and natural setting and are more likely to appeal to persons wanting a quieter and relaxing experience. And I'm sure that Councillor Woodward, as our council's mental health and wellbeing champion, would agree that this is something very positive which the council is looking to do. It also has economic benefits, as Mr. Rose has clearly pointed out, and the location is excellent because obviously we are all aware that we spent a lot of the time on agenda item 8 earlier this morning, dealing with various issues, structural issues to make it acceptable in the open landscape. And clearly this will be in the open countryside, but it will not be of any harm to the AONB, as Mr. Rose has pointed out. So for those reasons, I think it's a very good project and I'd be happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Gazard.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing new to add
No.
in support of it.
Thank you. And Councillor Whibley, anything to add?
Not really, other than if we can, we talk about sustainable tourism, and this is the way to do it. I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good plan.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, thank you, Councillor De Sarum, for mentioning mental health. I think it would be an excellent place to go and relax. I had noticed the list of objections. There is quite a lot of objections, actually, 23, I think it said. But the main ones are noise and lighting, which have been dealt with by conditions. Just to be pedantic, I think the condition on noise and complaint management is repeated in condition 9. So 3 and 9 to me look the same.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things that I was quite interested in the fact that on the 8th of September, I had a report come through, and you can see on my comments there, I have read the long and detailed report and agreed to the approval of the application, and I thought it was probably going to go to delegation. But as it was a major, I can quite understand now why it's come to committee.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
It's there. But I mean, at this place, I mean, this used to be Ho Seasons, and it's now been taken over privately by somebody called Mr. Twist, who is no relation to Councillor Twist, no relation whatsoever. But I mean, not only are these lodges there, but there are fishing lodges there because there are 3 lakes there as well. So it is a very relaxing part for holidays. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Davey. Anything to add?
No, just to say I support holiday accommodation. I think when we're considering the effect on the AONB, Chris is absolutely right. There's very little visual impact, but we also have to consider the effect of increased traffic. So you know, we shouldn't sort of think, oh well, there's no effect on the ONB. Interesting that we don't allow any permanent structures, because if you wanted to construct a visitor centre in the AONB, you wouldn't actually be able to do it at the moment, which is quite interesting. And I'm really pleased to see the electric car charging in there as well. I think that's going to become more and more of a feature of applications like this, and I'm very pleased to see it.
Thank you. Mrs. Shaw, sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you have a motion to recommend to officers to approve with the conditions as listed in the report. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you're in support of the recommendation to approve, whether you're against the recommendation to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, recommend approval.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Recommend approval.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Approve.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Wibley.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. This application is recommended for officers' approval.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 11, application 21-1441, advertising. It's a minor one. Martins of Exeter Limited, Sandygate, Exeter, pages 88 to 95. And we have the ward member who's on the committee to speak. So over to Chris for his report, please. We looked at this at a delegation meeting and decided that we'd rather send it to committee for a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so it's an application for installation of what they call a 48-sheet digital advertising hoarding. So it's 6.4 metres wide by 3.4 metres high on 2 metre high poles, so 2 metres off the ground. And as Councillor Ragg said, it's been referred from Chair delegation to assess the impact from it. So it's off the main Sandygate roundabout here, so the junction with the M5, and we've got the Martins of Exeter caravan and motorhome sales site here on the corner that people will be aware of. And you can see the location there for the digital display. So near to the building but not against it, on the or inside the site, but right on the verge with a roundabout that goes below the M5, and there you can see an elevation of it. So we've got 6.4 meters wide, 3.4 meters high, but the actual display itself is 6 meters by 3 meters on those stilts, and that's the image of the roundabout, and then the image of the roundabout with the advert hoarding. So you'll see that there's Parish Council's objection to this on the basis of its size, visual impact, and on the basis of it being a distraction from drivers. And there's concerns on there in the report from the ward member, again, about distraction and the visual impact, amongst other things. So we've consulted Highways England on this, so not DCC Highways, but Highways England, as they are the authority that look after the motorway and the motorway junction. So it's their responsibility that we go to in terms of getting the concerns or otherwise from them on the risk to highway safety. And they've come back, as you'll see in the report, and have raised no adverse highway safety concerns. I think they see a lot of these adverts to motorway junctions across the country. So they're raising no highway safety concerns, but subject to conditions which we see in the report about the maximum lighting level from the sign, that it has to be off when it's not working correctly. There can't be any movable images or road signs that might distract drivers. There should be a smooth transition between the display of the adverts. And there could be details of accidents and emergency stuff on there. So I've mentioned the size. It's to advertise the business and other adverts. So not just for Martins of Exeter, it could advertise other business needs on there. And the applicant said it could also show highways or emergency signs, as I mentioned. It's in the area of advertisement control, where we have stricter limits on what can be permitted development, but this needs advertisement consent because of its size. And we've got two issues or members have got two issues that you can consider in relation to adverts related to the advert regs and policy D4. So that's the amenity, so the visual impact of the proposal, and highway public safety. So I've mentioned the public safety element, that Highways England aren't raising an objection, and that's going to make it difficult for us to justify refusal of the scheme, even though I know it can be difficult to negotiate your way around this roundabout because of some of the lanes, unless it's my poor driving. But despite that, as I say, Highways England are raising no highway safety concerns. In terms of the visual impact, it's appropriately positioned. It's in association with the wider roundabout and the caravan units. There's no other adverts in the area, so they've kept the number to a minimum. We control the level of illumination through Highways England condition, and the materials and construction are considered to be acceptable. So really, as I say, two issues that members can consider: the highway safety impact and the visual impact. The view from officers is that we can't refuse on the highway safety grounds, given the comments from Highways England, and that we're going to struggle to uphold a refusal on visual grounds, bearing in mind we're talking about an advert off a main motorway junction, which are more and more common. So because of that, we are recommending approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. It's a nightmare of a junction, that one. You've got to know exactly which lane you need to go in to get to the other side. Could I ask you, Chris, just to clarify whether the image would be moving or still?
Yeah, so the part of the condition is it has to be static. It can change image, but they can't have some sort of, floating image that flies in. There's anything like that, Highways England are saying could distract drivers.
Yeah, thank you. Right, go to the ward member, Councillor Mike Howe.
Thank you very much, Chair. How can I start this? Quite simply, it's a carbuncle. There are no signs, notices or anything else in this area, as you can see. There are a few caravans parked there, quite nicely sedate, hidden just under a bank, just behind a bank. There are nice trees there. There are openings. There's a lovely old farm building that was Martin's Caravans, now Marquee Caravans. And then you stick this modern carbuncle, in the countryside. And it is the countryside. We are on a roundabout. Yes. And if you go towards Exeter, you see what the effect is of these signs. It is a travesty, to put it mildly. And we don't want it in East Devon. we want to welcome people to East Devon for the holiday destination of their life. Forget Cornwall, we're better. They can come here and have a wonderful time down here. But in all seriousness, this should be refused, quite simply. And on D4, as Mr. Rose has mentioned, there are 3 paragraphs that are relevant in D4, but the header is consent will be granted for applications for the display of advertisements, taking into consideration their merits in the interests of amenity and or public safety where the following criteria are met. And that is the important bit, where met. And we're not arguing about highways, although I totally disagree with highways of position, being as there's accidents there every day. But we list 5 items that have to be met. Item 1, line 1, is the advertisement is appropriately positioned in relation to the design of the building and of an appropriate scale. Well, the building, as you can see in the background there, is dwarfed by this massive sign prominently put at the front. We'll ignore 2 because that's to do with highway safety, and as we say, we can't really do that. 3, advertisements are kept to a minimum and amalgamated wherever possible to avoid clutter. Okay, I get that, which would detract from the character of the building and the street scene. That I don't agree with. This, of course, detracts from the character of the building and the street scene, quite plainly. 4 is about light and illumination again. Again, we can't argue about that. But 5, the construction materials and the colours of the advertisement are sympathetic to the building and area. And again, this isn't. Blatantly, it isn't. So it is against our own policy D4. When you add that, we have refused, argued, made enforcement action against other developers who advertised non-related things, which is what this is proposing. I'd have a bit more sympathy if it is just for marquee caravans. It's not. It'll advertise every other thing possible. And we don't need any more highways advertising because there's a highway sign just to the left. There's several of them over the motorway, etc. So the highways information signs is a complete no-go. But committee, I ask you to look at it. Is it a welcome to East Devon? Is it a welcome to the holiday resort of Exmouth and others? Or is it, as I believe, just urbanisation and then would come the second and third ones, which you couldn't refuse because you're allowed number 1. So committee, I look forward to your understanding.
Thank you. And perhaps now, after hearing that, you can understand why it's come before you today. Councillor has very helpfully given the policy reasons under D4, and it's up to you to judge. It's a difficult one because without the support of highways, the highways agency, then it's finely balanced, I think. So, right, we have a list of speakers. Oh, surprise, surprise. Councillor Philip Skinner is first. Quick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hate pulling surprises on you, but anyway, there we go. I was going to ask, one of the questions I was going to ask Mr. Rose was how does this fit with the refusal? If we refuse it, where would that sit? And I think Mr. Rose answered that actually when you came back through you, Chair. So that answered that one. So I think another question I would like to ask is whom controls the sign and the advertising? And I'm assuming it's Martin's Caravans because they're putting it up, but I'd just like the answer to the question just to be absolutely sure, Mr. Rose, if that was possible, please.
Yeah, so it won't be the highways agency or us. It will be the owners of that sign will control what goes on it, subject to the conditions.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's kick off and see where we are. And I've absolutely heard what Councillor Howe has said, and he's talking about a conglomeration of what could be the first one to many. And I think my answer to that is we have to deal with each application as it comes. This is an application talking about one sign. Whether there's going to be more or not more is all conjecture, and that could be something possibly into the future. As far as I'm concerned, as long as it wasn't, and that's been made clear in the report, and you Chair, you asked a question about the changing of the signs and the speed of it. It's not going to be speedily changing signs. It's not going to. It's going to have an illumination that's relatively low. I can see why somebody else could put something like this up, and it does have a benefit that it could add information to people, give people information that could be on that road if indeed Highways Authority, and I believe it's mentioned, may have the ability to interact with information if it wanted to. You could say it's a finely balanced one. I've looked at the ins and outs. I think where it becomes finely balanced is a fact. I think if we had a refusal and Martin's Caravans went for an appeal, I think they would win. And I think on that basis, why wouldn't we do that? So I'll propose the recommendation to follow the recommendation of the officers in this application, and I will be supporting this sign going on this motorway because it does bring benefits, along with what Mr. Councillor Hay was suggesting the disbenefits, and I understand he's a ward member and I understand that he's there, alluding to it being in the countryside on an M5 motorway roundabout. Could be a bit debatable for me, but anyway, we are where we are, so I'm going to go with the officer's recommendation and propose the support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please? No seconder? Okay, then Councillor Richard Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points I'd like to make. I do agree with Councillor Howe that if that picture of the sign was taken away, you'd see that the background to this is actually trees, and that's what Devon is all about. You know, people don't want to come down here and see a huge illuminated 48 sheet poster. And where they say there's no distraction, if there are going to be moving advertisements on this, albeit each advertisement is going to be static, but they are going to interchange, that is a distraction. I mean, I've cycled around this roundabout. I can tell you it's murder. I mean, just having any slight distraction just out of the corner of your eye is going to take people's eye off the road. And I just can't really see how it's going to add to the character of the area. I just think the whole thing is a complete distraction and will cause accidents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't unmute myself. I mean, I just cannot believe the monstrosity of this sign. You've got people there coming down to a very, very big roundabout. Now, I mean, if they're going to be sort of concentrating on which lane they're supposed to be in, then they see something like that, they're going to be looking. And it's unbelievable that the National Highways have not really sort of objected to it. I just can't believe it. I suppose the thing is, they're sat in their ivory office and they probably haven't even come there, just seen it on a map. But to me, there is no way I could support that there because I mean, let's face it, it's going to be a money-making thing for Martin's there. But I just cannot accept that a huge sign like that is acceptable in our area. And there's no way that I would vote for this. I would certainly be against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, just to I certainly support everything Councillor Howe has said and the reasons why we might refuse. I think it is baffling how highways have said it's okay, but I think we need to look at this particular roundabout, and there may be such hoardings on other roundabouts. But as we all know, as we use this junction a lot, particularly if you're coming from Sidmouth and Exmouth, you'd suddenly see this illuminated sign out of your left side eyesight, and I think that would cause considerable danger because you're trying to, as has been mentioned, negotiate which lane you should be in, either to get to Middlemore or the services, because there are 3 roads leading off on the other side. It's not as though it's a 4-party roundabout, and it is on the countryside. if it was on the other side of the motorway, perhaps that'd be acceptable. And as to benefiting whom, economic benefit is only going to be to Mr. Hughes and to the Martins. I don't think that's sufficient economic benefit to support this application. So I'm definitely against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm grateful to whoever provided this mock-up. I mean, if it was the applicants, then they have absolutely shot themselves in the foot. And if it was our officers who've kind of put this into scale, then good for them, because I think it just shows what a visual intrusion that is. Like everybody else, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that Highways England had no objection to this. Normally, they're really hot on any kind of distraction for drivers. So I cannot see that, that can be sustained. The idea that it could display highways information, I think that's just a red herring that's been put in to distract us. So I think we can discount that one. It's been conditioned at 30 seconds change between adverts. Well, you can be waiting at those lights more than 30 seconds. So during that time, that image would change, which I think could be a distraction, especially just as the lights change. That image changes and your eye is drawn off it and you suddenly realise you've drifted across the wrong lane. And like everybody else, I've negotiated this junction on many an occasion, and I frequently see people, especially visitors, having great trouble getting into the right lane. Finally, why? What benefits are there from this? Absolutely none. I mean, Councillor Skinner suggested there were some benefits. I cannot see any benefits to anyone apart from the people who will presumably get some advertising revenue from this sign. But it's not going to, that to me does not outweigh the visual intrusion of this sign. So we've got amenity and safety. Well, it's been suggested we can't disallow it on safety grounds because Highways England haven't challenged it. I don't know. I think we could actually, and say with our local knowledge that we can say that it is going to contribute to traffic hazard, and certainly on amenity grounds there is absolutely no reason why we should have this. I think therefore it should be refused on the grounds that it is a distraction from the amenity, therefore I absolutely support refusal of this.
Right, Councillor Gazzard, anything to add?
No, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt, anything to add? You're on mute. Councillor Pratt, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'd like to say that local information from councillors and parish councillors is very interesting, because I'm very disappointed with the Highways England report. When you read from Bishop's Clist that we're dealing with a roundabout where you have 4 lanes merging into 3, 5 major exits and extremely busy traffic, which causes confusion to motorists, especially tourists, then goodness me, honestly, road safety is far more important than anything else on this occasion. And I fully support Mike Howe and hope everyone will refuse this.
Thank you. And Councillor De Sarum, anything to add?
I was just going to say, we are very fortunate that you brought this through to us through Councillor Chair's delegation, Chair. And of course, as everyone has said, we must congratulate Councillor Howe on his vigilance for making sure that we were all made aware of this. And I too expressed the concerns raised about the not having enough wider benefits economically. And I think Councillor Lawrence earlier on in the debate highlighted, as he is a keen cyclist, to him it will be a distraction. So I think that if cyclists such as Councillor Councillor Lawrence is concerned, then I think we all have to be concerned. But I do take Mr. Rose's point that it is very difficult to justify this, but I'm hoping that we can justify it, because obviously nobody wants the council to be responsible for any economic issues as a result of an appeal going the wrong way. So I do bear that in mind when I reach my decision. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Well, we've had quite a few of you speak against it, but as yet, the first proposal to support the application fell. There was no seconder. We haven't had a proposal. I think we might have one on the way. Councillor Howe.
Yes, thank you, Chair and committee, for your words. When I spoke originally, I didn't raise the issue of highways because of highways comments. I am opposed to highways comments, don't get me wrong, but because of the possible risk of a appeal costing money on that, and us not having any expert opinion, only our own views, same views that they are, you know, I didn't raise that. But there are 3 good reasons to refuse this, and they are subjective, so I don't believe they could cost us a penny. Because, as I say, subjective things are exactly that, and they are what I spoke before. So as such, I would recommend refusal, please, because the advertisement is not appropriately positioned in relation to the design of the building and or of an appropriate scale. It is also not kept to a minimum, amalgamated where possible to avoid clutter, which would detract from the character of the building and the street scene. Particularly that, it does detract from the building. And the construction materials and colours of the advertisement are absolutely not sympathetic to the building and the area. It blatantly isn't. So I believe there are 3 reasons there for refusal, all based on D4. And I would ask committee to support me on that. But if you wish to go further, then please do.
No, and the reasons for refusal would be points 1, 3 and 5 of D4.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that. Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lawrence, and I take my hat off to you for riding round, because you wouldn't get, it can't even get me round there in a car, let alone on a bike. So we've had a proposer and a seconder. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw, for the vote, for the summing up.
Through you, Chair, does Mr. Rose wish to come back on any of those grounds, as he hasn't had an opportunity?
Through you, Chair. No, we will hopefully, maybe with the help of Councillor Howe, we'll do our best to fight any appeal if it comes in.
Thank you, Chair. Therefore, members, you have before you a recommendation contrary to officers' recommendations to refuse for the reasons as set out in policy D4, sub criteria 1, 3 and 5. Members, when your names are called, please would you indicate whether you're in support of that motion to recommend refusal, whether you're against the motion to recommend refusal, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Support the recommendation for refusal.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the recommendation for refusal.
Councillor Davey.
Support refusal.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support the recommendations for refusal contained in policy D4, particularly sub-clauses 1, 3 and 5, as outlined by Councillor Howe. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Support refusal, Chair.
Councillor Howe.
Support refusal.
Councillor Key.
Support refusal.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pratt.
Support refusal.
Councillor Skinner.
I don't have any choice. I'm against refusal.
Councillor Whibley.
I will support refusal on all the aforementioned sub-clauses.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
What Councillor De Sarum said. No, but seriously, support refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg.
And I'll support refusal. I was going to abstain, But I think it will be interested to see if this goes to appeal, how it stands up. I'll come with you, Chris.
Thank you. So just to confirm, the recommendation is, it's recommended for officer's refusal.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, that was interesting. I'm glad we gave it a good bashing. Agenda item 12, application 21, 1530, full minor application for 10 Brimpany Road, Exmouth, pages 96 to 102. And we have one speaker, Councillor, no, Andrew.
Really sorry to interrupt. Chair, I'm gonna have to run. I have another meeting I need to go to. So
Okay.
I was hoping to fit it in the lunch, but thank you very much all. Cheers.
So thanks for your attendance. Thank you. Right. So welcome to the meeting, Andrew Long. Chris, over to you to present your report, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we've got an application here for construction of a new dwelling. So it's demolition of a side extension and construction of a new dwelling. And it's also been referred from chair delegation. And you'll see from the report, there's a town council objection. They think that their comments are that the plot's too narrow and there's inadequate amenity space. But there are no third party comments in the report, so no comments from neighbours. So this is the site here. So you all of the site at the moment, and they're showing that the side, they can build an extension on the side here, have a dwelling, and then have its garden split as such. A bit clearer there, sorry. So extension to the side, turn that into a dwelling, and then you have the area in red as the garden to that property. So, and then at the front, so this would be the extension to the side. You'd have a garden area coming back, and at the front, you'd have 2 parking spaces for the new dwelling, 2 parking spaces for the existing. It's relevant to note here before I go on that last year we approved a 2-storey side extension to this property, which, other than the inclusion of a door here, was, I believe, virtually identical in terms of its scale, design, appearance, impact, heights, everything. So they're proposing now the same structure that was a side extension, but now proposing it as a separate dwelling. And so you can see there from the front how they would put this porch on the front and the door, and then in effect this divide by the chimney would be the new dwelling. And then from the rear, again, this is exactly as was approved in the application last year for a house extension. You get accommodation in the roof and at first and ground floor. And there you go. There's your floor plans of your lower level living area out onto a patio area, and then bedrooms on the upper floors, and the roof plan. And this is the street scene. So you can see the area to the front's already hard surfaced. So the extension, as approved, goes on the side. And now what they want to do is use that extension as a separate dwelling. And that's the image to the rear at the moment. So dwelling on the side and split the garden. So it's in the built-up area boundary, so the principle of development is acceptable. And as I said, we've approved an identical extension there last year. So in terms of the design, it's as per that extension with the addition of the door to the front. So it's going to be hard to justify any harm from the extension, bearing in mind we've already approved that in terms of the bulk height, size, etc. In terms of the amenity on the neighbours, again, as the extension is exactly the same as the extension, this dwelling is the same as the extension we've approved. There's not going to be any additional harm to the amenity of adjoining residents. With regard, and in terms of amenity space, they've got a 14-metre long rear garden, so adequate rear amenity space. As you saw from the photos, 2 parking spaces to the front, so that's adequate to serve the dwelling. So whilst it is narrower than all the other plots in the road, it won't, and it's not an extension that's proposed anymore. Its visual impact is acceptable. The parking level is acceptable. There's no amenity impact on the neighbours, no loss of privacy. So I think other than being able to appreciate this front door in the front, I'm not sure from the street scene you would really notice that there's a separate dwelling here. So in light of that, we're recommending approval.
Thank you. Now, Andrew Long, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
So the scheme for a new end of terrace dwelling offers a unique architecturally designed home ideal for a young family, for which there is a strong demographic housing need in the area. As Chris just pointed out, the scheme was prepared following the previously approved planning application for side extensions to the semi-detached dwelling. Many key material planning issues have therefore already been taken on board in development, and the extensions applications also had full plans building regs approval, accommodating the future need for a dwelling, and construction works are in progress, which is running alongside this application. The application only received one objection, which was from the Parish Town Council regarding policy D1.3 on design and local distinctiveness. Further to discussions with the planning case officer, Mr. Paul Golding, regarding the material implications of this policy, it was considered that the site appeared too narrow in the street scene. We have since worked with the planning officer and taken on board their feedback and have amended the materials at the front, rear and side elevations to grey render and red brickwork, which are sensitive to the existing front elevation, akin to the host semi-detached dwelling, which we consider more harmonious to the street scene as a whole. Accordingly, the revised drawings were resubmitted, and Chris just presented them just now. I'd just like to thank the officers for their input into the scheme and trust the members of the planning committee will be supportive of the application for a unique bespoke starter home, which meets the material planning legislation and supports the housing need of the area. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Right. Mr. Rose, I'd just like to ask, on page 99, one of the reasons the permission was given said that the building was unsuitable for independent residential occupation due to its relationship with adjacent buildings. Can you say what's changed between then and now, please?
Sorry, were they the comments from the town council?
It's under planning history.
Okay, let me just have a look. Let me get that up. Sorry.
Page 99.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't got planning history.
It's in italics.
Through you,
Sorry,
Chair. Chris, it's the reason for the refusal. The condition. It is the reason for the imposition of the condition.
Yeah.
Of condition 3.
I don't know what condition it was.
Sorry, I don't have. Sorry, I haven't got page numbers on mine. So.
Oh, okay. Well, under planning history, it said the additional accommodation hereby permitted shall be used only in conjunction with and ancillary to the use of Ken Brimpany.
Yeah. That was simply because. Sorry, that was simply because that's what was being applied for at the time. So they came in and applied for a house extension.
Okay.
So we just conditioned that it was a house extension because obviously if it was something else, then the members of the public wouldn't have been aware of that and had a chance to comment.
Yeah. The reason it says the building is unsuitable for independent residential occupation due to its relationship with adjacent dwellings. That's a bit that puzzled me.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it was simply that it wasn't the proposal we had at the time, and I think it's fair to say that at that time we shared, or we might have shared concerns that the town council had about the narrowness of this plot in the street scene, because you can see that this dwelling is a lot narrower than the adjoining ones.
Yeah.
So I think having not assessed the application, that was our concern.
Yeah.
But obviously now we've got the application in front of us, and well, we've now had an opportunity to assess it, and we're struggling to find any harm, bearing in mind it's going to look exactly the same as the extension that we've approved.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Steve Gazzard, are you the ward member for there?
No, it's in Brixington, Chair.
Oh, it's in Brixington now.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, your hand was up to speak.
Thank you.
First.
Thank you very much. And I'm very grateful that you asked Mr. Rose that question, because I was going to ask that similar question myself. But and thanks for the clarification on that. I'm going to go with the officer's recommendation for approval, Chair, because I think that now that, as we've heard from the applicant, they're going to take on board the street scene and make it so that it will actually fit in with the same sort of housing there. I think that is one of my concerns I had originally.
Yeah.
As the applicant has said, and I fully support that, hopefully it's going to be a starter home for a young couple, and we desperately need that sort of accommodation in Exmouth. So for those reasons, I would like to go with the officer's recommendation, Chair, of approval.
Are you that proposition?
Happy to second it, Councillor Desarum.
Thank you, Councillor Desarum. Would you like to speak on it?
Just briefly, I totally agree with Councillor Gazzard's earlier comments, and I think that the key is the fact that they've amended plans have been received, which have removed the cladding in favour of the brick render finish. So the applicant has done their best to make sure that the house fits in, and the fact that last year we did a similar extension which was approved. So really, there is nowhere else to go with this application other than to approve it in line with the recommendation. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. I visited the site over the weekend and had a look. So the issue is whether it's going to be part of the same family or a separate family. But I think there's a need for, as has been said, smaller starter units, more affordable housing available. And I don't think it would detract from the close. It's yeah, I think it would fit in without causing any harmful amenity, and there's adequate parking. There's 2 spaces out the front for parking, so I think I support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. And could a question to Mr. Rose is just what's buzzing through my head in a minute. What other amenity space goes with this particular property from behind? Sorry, I must have missed where you must no doubt you had plans.
There's a 40-foot garden, Councillor Skinner.
Okay. So there is a bit of amenity space that goes with it. That was the point I was trying. That's right. I missed that. That sort of didn't grab me. So okay, that's fine. I'm quite happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no speakers. Over to Mrs. Shaw for summing up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you have a recommendation in 2 parts. The first is to adopt the appropriate assessment for this application, and there's a recommendation to officers to approve, subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Again, when your name is called, please would you indicate whether you're in support of the recommendation to approve, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Support approval.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support approval.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor Desarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you, sir. That application is recommended for officers' approval.
Is it back to Shirley for the second part of the application?
No, I think it was all wrapped up in the one vote.
Oh, it was. That's fine then. Okay, that brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including members of the public, for their attendance. And members, can I remind you that until the Democratic Services team confirm that the live streaming and recording has stopped, you can still be seen and heard, and any comments made may be recorded. And can I thank you from the chair for such an intelligent debate. We've had some interesting ones today, and politics out of it completely, thank goodness, and purely dealing with the issues. And you know, I'm grateful to you as chair of the committee for your helpful input. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.